The scene opens on the imposing, dilapidated facade of the abandoned Hotel Finn. Inside, a young man covered in blood mercilessly plunges a knife into a man lying prone on the floor. With a hardened, blood-splattered face, he thinks to himself that this brutal act will finally bring everything to an end. Standing amidst a room strewn with slain bodies, the boy embodies the very definition of a murderer, specifically a revenge killer driven by his dark past. The corpses littered across the floor belong to criminals who thought they could escape punishment, though the boy's vengeful massacre has now turned him into a criminal as well. Despite spending 5 long years conducting these executions to achieve his ultimate goal, the boy finds absolutely no sense of fulfillment in his revenge. Gripping his blood-soaked survival knife, he resolves to leave absolutely nothing behind in the aftermath of his slaughter. In a chilling final act, the young man slowly raises the crimson-stained blade directly toward his own throat. With a steady gaze and unflinching resolve, he decisively slashes the blade deep across his neck. Blood violently sprays as he falls, acknowledging that his suicide is neither atonement nor an escape, but simply a way to remove himself and sever the cycle of revenge. As his vision fades to black, he reflects that this finally ends a descent that began 5 years ago when he allowed an essential part of his soul to die. His fading consciousness desperately reaches out to a fragmented, lingering memory. The grisly room falls completely silent, framing the boy's lifeless body lying motionless in a pool of his own blood amidst the slaughtered criminals. Lying face down in the dark crimson pool, it seems the boy's harrowing journey of revenge has definitively come to an end. However, the absolute finality of his death is not as certain as it initially appeared. A mysterious voice suddenly pierces the void, questioning if throwing away his life was truly a meaningless waste. The dark void of death shatters as the boy's consciousness floats against a surreal, glowing backdrop of interconnected digital nodes. Suspended in this ethereal, matrix-like dimension, his fully restored body drifts aimlessly while still clutching his survival knife. The perspective abruptly shifts back to the eerie, clouded night sky looming over the abandoned Hotel Finn. Groaning in utter confusion, the boy's eyes flutter open as he suddenly regains consciousness. Expecting to be dead in the hotel, he sits up in absolute shock to find himself surrounded by the sunlit, overgrown ruins of an ancient temple. Frantically checking his own body, he realizes his fatal neck wound has completely vanished and all his modern belongings are missing. His eyes widen in stark realization that the only possession he retains is the blood-stained knife still gripped tightly in his hand. Staring intently at the cold steel of the blade, a grim, undeniable sense of determination slowly washes over his face. Gathering his resolve, he decides that his current location does not matter as long as he can complete the one dark task he is still driven to do. Suddenly, an explosive magical force detonates nearby with a deafening roar. Startled by the sudden eruption of power, he flinches as sharp shards of debris violently graze his face. As the dust settles around the freshly crumbled wall, an unknown figure calmly approaches and notes his surprising lack of hesitation. The steady clack of boots descending the ancient stone stairs echoes through the ruins alongside a playful question. A cheerful, heavily armed young girl steps into the light, casually bearing an assortment of daggers strapped to her waist. Smiling brightly, she asks if she startled him and playfully checks if he understands that the blast he just witnessed was actual magic. Striking a confident pose, she proudly introduces herself as the beautiful Shiro before directly asking for his name. Completely ignoring her bubbly introduction, he coldly demands to know where they are and if this bizarre world is even reality. He explains that he was in a completely different place just moments ago, but Shiro stubbornly repeats her demand to know his name. He finally relents and introduces himself as Kurono Kasuke, a name that causes the girl to pause in minor confusion. Noting that Japanese names are highly unusual in this realm, she cheerfully decides to nickname him Kuro for simplicity. Realizing he is no longer on Earth, Kuro listens in shock as Shiro explains that he is an otherworlder who has been reincarnated into this new dimension. Overlooking a sprawling, magnificent fantasy city built into the mountainside, Shiro playfully commends him for grasping the strange situation so quickly. Shiro reveals she is also a reincarnated otherworlder acting as his guide, but Kuro aggressively interrupts by demanding to know why she interfered with his suicide. Leveling his blood-stained blade directly at her, Kuro glares with murderous intent and coldly demands a real answer. Mumbling about suicide, the confused boy sits in the ruins and tries to process his bizarre situation. When Shiro bluntly asks why he wants to kill himself, he coldly retorts that his life has nothing to do with her. Unfazed, she casually replies that she still needs a valid reason to stop him. Leaning in closely, she asks if throwing away his life isn't just a massive waste. Staring intently into his eyes, she explains that every single otherworlder hears a specific voice when they arrive and asks if he heard it too. Shiro notes that while she was called a pity because she died in an accident, those who commit suicide are told their death is a waste. Realizing her logic, he looks up in disbelief and asks if she only stopped him because the mysterious voice deemed his death a waste. Calling him a pain for needing more reasons, she warmly smiles and offers to throw in some extra information as a bonus. She elaborates that reincarnated people are incredibly common here, sharing the universal experience of the voice and the knowledge that this world is called Arkware. Still processing the monumental revelation, he stares blankly into the cold, ruined landscape. Gesturing for him to follow, she enthusiastically offers to show him around the streets and tells him to come along. Before she can walk away, he aggressively grabs her arm while keeping a firm grip on his combat knife. Staring at her with desperate intensity, he mutters the single name Tawa. With a dangerous glint in his eyes, he demands to know if she has ever heard of his most important person, Kurono Tawa. Amidst a flashing digital background, it becomes clear that this is the story of a young man receiving a second chance at life after his revenge. Remembering his past, he visualizes his little sister as a beautiful, bright, and popular girl who constantly turned heads. Despite feeling completely mediocre compared to her, he was always immensely proud to call the excellent girl his little sister. Tragically, she was brutally murdered, and by the time he finally arrived at the snowy crime scene, she had already passed away. Eaten alive by suicidal remorse over losing his normal life, he ultimately refused to forget the culprits responsible for her demise. After hunting for 5 grueling years, he tracked down the group of boys responsible and mercilessly slaughtered them. Succeeding in his dark mission, he immediately ended his own life to finish the revenge tragedy, which was exactly how it was supposed to go. Snapping out of his grim flashback, his eyes shoot wide open as he gasps in sudden shock. Blinking away the days, he realizes he is resting on Shiro's lap as she cheerfully notes that he is finally awake. Staring up at a rustic ceiling, he asks where he is, prompting her to explain that she brought him here after he suddenly collapsed. He sits up and surveys his surroundings, taking in the sights of a bustling, medieval-style fantasy tavern filled with lively patrons. Observing the foreign atmosphere, he accepts that he is truly in a different world where other reincarnated souls might also reside. Boisterous patrons warmly welcome the newcomer while laughing about his weird stats, leaving Kurono entirely confused by the gaming terminology. Leaning over him playfully, Shiro asks if he mistook her for the tavern's promotional poster girl. She proudly declares that he is exactly right about this being her workplace and home, to which he simply apologizes for being a bother. Ignoring her teasing questions about changing his mind, he is caught off guard when she suddenly asks him about the identity of Tawa. She explains that he constantly mumbled the name in his sleep, correctly guessing that Tawa must be a member of his family. Glancing away with a pained expression, he quietly admits that Tawa was his little sister who passed away 5 years ago. Electrified by the possibility that unhappy souls are reborn here, Kurono jumps up when Shiro reveals she actually has clues regarding the name Tawa. She quickly grounds his expectations by warning him that the search could be a completely wasted effort, especially since his sister might use a different name or not even be in this world. Acknowledging the grim odds, his resolute gaze confirms to Shiro that he still desperately wants to know everything she has found. Outlining her knowledge, she describes 4 powerful individuals sharing variations of the name, including a witch in Mariku and a skilled magician in Arisodo Shalaru. She mentions a chivalric leader in Gadaundra and the local red hero of Daratora, though she unfortunately lacks helpful details regarding their exact appearances or ages due to potential timeline differences. Evaluating his limited options, Kurono decisively states his immediate intention to track down and meet the local hero named Toei Reitsu. Brushing off his insistence on working alone, Shiro counters that going solo will be difficult before launching into an explanation about heroes and reincarnated status adjustments. She explains that these adjustments often bless visitors with incredible strength or magic, allowing a select few to make massive national contributions in exchange for high nobility. Grasping the sheer scale of their power, Kurono listens as she ultimately defines a hero as a legendary being who has protected Arkware's peace since the mythic times. Holding up a finger, Shiro explains that conquering a dungeon is the absolute minimum requirement to earn honor and meet the kingdom's heroes. She clarifies that these dungeons contain dangerous monsters, trials, and demons, but defeating specific enemies rewards challengers with powerful items known as magic equipment. Resigned to these surprising details, Kuro admits he has no other choice, while Shiro suddenly remembers she needs to give him something. She presents an ornate case containing a pair of contact lenses, playfully noting that they aren't meant for simply improving his eyesight. Stepping back into the stone-arched hallway, she offers to help him put them on to receive their many benefits, but Kuro insists on handling it himself. As he puts them in, a system interface suddenly activates to commence a new registration, while Shiro promises he will soon be able to see many new things. A glowing progress bar quickly reaches 100% to finalize the registration process. Kuro gasps in absolute shock as translucent text panels materialize in his vision, prompting Shiro to casually explain that everyone in this world lives with this kind of interface. Shiro elaborates that this direct glasses device can project documents, send messages, and display public information about anyone he looks at. Feeling completely immersed in video game logic, Kuro listens closely as Shiro instructs him to silently focus his thoughts on displaying his stats. Closing his eyes, he concentrates his mind to confirm and pull up his own registrant information. Shiro smiles warmly, noting that while everyone starts at level 1, his stats are surprisingly high, and explains the glasses can also read equipment data. Examining his stats, Kuro is deeply confused to see his proficient magical attribute listed as black, wondering if it signifies a sinful deed and realizing this is what shocked his previous guide. He spots another trait labeled Divine Blessing, Eternal Prayer, which Shiro notes she was able to see from the very beginning. Shiro explains that gods in this world grant special adjustments called Divine Protection to those they love, functioning much like a guardian spirit from his previous life. With a knowing look, she reveals that this powerful divine protection has actually been with him since before he was even reincarnated. Trembling with realization, Kuro deduces that the eternal prayer granting him maximum survival is the manifestation of his little sister Tawa's desperate wish for her older brother to keep living. Shiro gently warns him that conquering a labyrinth remains extremely difficult and dying is still very possible, while Kuro envisions the angelic form of his sister Eternity hovering beside him. Empowered by the eternally connected life force protecting him, he vows to use this newly discovered chance at life entirely for her. A brilliant new path opens for the young man who thought his journey was over, fueling his fierce determination to find his sister no matter what. A map displays the kingdom of Daratora, centered firmly on the sprawling continent of Arkilia. Daratora is a prosperous kingdom maintained by heroes, blessed with a great environment full of lush green pastures and vibrant farms. The reincarnated boy ventures forth into the royal capital of Juridiasu, marking the true beginning of his brand new story. Snapping back to reality on the cobbled streets, Kuro apologizes for spacing out, prompting a worried Shiro to reach out and offer her hand. Stressing that they will be in a tough situation if she loses sight of him again, she suggests they take a guided stroll around his very first town. With slight hesitation, Kuro reaches out and gently grasps her hand to stay close. They arrive outside a weapon and armor store, where a booming voice happily calls out to them from the doorway. A massive, muscular man enthusiastically compliments Kuro's new adventurer look while Shiro cheerfully greets him. Inspecting his lightweight gear, Kuro worries if it will be enough to fight dungeon monsters, but Shiro assures him it is perfect for a beginner level. Shiro giggles, illustrating that with his incredibly high stats and system adjustments, he could get hit by a truck and walk away completely fine. Declaring that their next step is memorizing magic, they head toward a magic equipment store bearing a mystical wooden sign. Recalling his unique, black attribute, Kuro admits he has no idea how to use it, prompting Shiro to suggest they ask the store manager for guidance. Inside, the towering, bald store manager laughs boisterously, teasing Shiro about finally finding a man, which she immediately and sternly shuts down. Flashing a confident thumbs up, the burly man formally introduces himself to the newcomer as Jirigianosu, insisting he simply be called Jiru. Kuro introduces himself and asks what makes this shop's magic equipment different, unimpressing Jiru, who has heard the standard retrieval line many times. Jiru opens a polished wooden chest to reveal artificial magic equipment known as sheets, explaining that simply letting one melt on the tongue instantly grants a magic skill. Laughing at Kuro's blatant look of disbelief, the large man suggests they head to a convenient location to test the items out. Standing outside in a designated magic training area, Jiro confirms Kuro swallowed the sheets and tells him to focus on the wind attribute formula that just entered his mind. Closing his eyes, Kuro realizes the entire spell casting process from start to finish is now firmly engraved in his head. A powerful gust of wind suddenly swirls perfectly around Kuro, prompting an impressed Jiro to declare it a success while an excited Shiro suggests they try water magic next. Kuro tests his magical sheets, successfully commanding water to overflow from them. When the bald man asks if he wants to try other elements, Kuro begins channeling water and wind. With a swift command, Kuro merges the two elements to instantly freeze them into a solid chunk of ice. Shiro watches in awe as the bald man praises the impressive newbie for instinctively combining water and wind into ice without any prior instruction. Smirking confidently with an outstretched hand, Kuro realizes he is finally getting the hang of his new magical abilities. Walking through the bustling town after a ton of shopping, Kuro apologizes to Shiro for making her pay for all their big catches. Shiro cheerfully waves off his concern, reminding him that he can just pay her back using the reward money from defeating monsters. Suddenly breaking into a panic, Shiro realizes she completely forgot an important errand and declares they have to hurry. Completely ignoring Kuro's plea to wait, Shiro dashes off down the street and yells back for him to stay put without getting lost. Left standing alone near the bustling bridge, Kuro casually notes that he could have helped her if it was just a simple shopping trip. Gazing out over the sprawling, unfamiliar cityscape, Kuro finally sheds his suspicions and accepts that this is undeniably a different world from Earth. Surrounded by flashing memories of his past life, Kuro acknowledges the reality of magic and divine protection in Arculia while wondering if Tawa is in this world too. His deep thoughts are abruptly interrupted when a mysterious voice from behind asks what he is doing. Kuro turns around to find a striking woman with long white hair and revealing armor standing quietly on the bridge behind him. Staring at him with intense, swirling eyes, the mysterious woman asks if he is the visitor who arrived yesterday since this is her first time seeing his face. Kuro is immediately unnerved by her strange gaze, noting internally that her eyes are pretty but unnaturally dark. Startled and slightly sweating under her intense scrutiny, Kuro awkwardly stammers and asks the woman to identify herself. She flatly invites him to inspect her stats, prompting Kuro to open a system window that reveals she is a level 41 hero named Quenti Celeste with maxed out natural talent. Shocked by the high-level status screen, Kuro realizes that this imposing woman is a hero just like Toei Reitsu. Leaning in closer, Quenti praises his impressive potential, noting that his stats do not resemble those of a mere level 1 adventurer. Kuro confirms she is one of the revered heroes tasked with maintaining the country's peace, expecting someone of her status to be amazing. Staring blankly ahead, Quenti coldly explains that heroes are forced to slay demons and gather magic equipment simply because of their assigned titles. She elaborates that while normal people possess natural attributes like fire and water, heroes exist solely to destroy enemies out of sheer obligation. Quenti then reveals she holds the white color attribute, making her arguably the strongest in Arculia, and points out that Kuro possesses a similarly rare color attribute. Her dark eyes widen with deep melancholy as she confesses she always believed she was the only one in the world burdened with being so uniquely special. Staring intensely at him, she grimly predicts that Kuro will eventually be worshipped by the masses exactly like she is. Cutting straight through her rising despair, Kuro suddenly looks her in the eye and bluntly asks if she wants to quit being a hero. Maintaining a calm and steady expression, Kuro casually suggests that if she truly hates her situation, it is perfectly fine for her to just run away. Quenti's dark eyes widen in genuine shock as she processes the fact that Kuro is the very first person to ever say something like that to her. Kuro explains that her bitterness was obvious, assuring her that she isn't a bad person for wanting to escape a forced destiny even if it causes trouble for others. Meeting her gaze firmly, he advises her to completely ignore the people demanding her sacrifice and to start living life exactly as she wants. When she softly admits she wouldn't know what to do next, Kuro just chuckles and tells her to figure that part out after she makes her escape. A faint blush crosses Quenti's cheeks, her stern expression finally softening as she quietly absorbs his genuinely liberating advice. The touching moment is broken when Shiro suddenly returns waving her arms to apologize for the wait, just as Kuro mentions he is chatting with a hero. Kuro turns back around to introduce them, only to find the bridge completely empty where the white-haired woman had just been standing. Highly confused by the empty space, Shiro asks what was going on, prompting Kuro to dismiss the bizarre encounter entirely. Staring up at the towering buildings, Kuro silently laments that the abrupt interruption ruined his only chance to ask her about Toei Reitsu. Later that day, Kuro and Shiro arrive at the imposing stone entrance of a massive dungeon flanked by heavily armored guards. A stern guard stops them to issue a warning, advising them to be extremely careful since another party has already entered the dungeon ahead of them today. Standing side by side with resolute expressions, Kuro and Shiro agree that it is finally time for them to siege a dungeon. Navigating the dark tunnels, Shiro strictly warns Kuro that there is no revival magic in this world, meaning if he dies, it is permanent. Shiro explains that they won't go too deep on his first run, even though the only key to reaching Tawa lies at the bottom of the deep hole. Plunging into the dark abyss, the former Avenger boldly takes his very first step as a dungeon seeker. Dungeons are scattered all across Arculia and can be broadly classified into two distinct types based on their properties. The first type belongs to the territory of the gods, featuring holy shrines that extend high into the sky where the angels' trials await. The second type falls under the territory of demons, consisting of evil areas that plunge into deep abysses where monsters are born. Arriving on the first floor of the fire element evil area known as Zest, Shiro warns Kuro to stay highly alert because monsters can appear unexpectedly. She explains that monsters born in these evil areas constantly aim to reach the surface to attack humans, forcing the country to pay raiders to suppress them. As a grotesque creature suddenly appears, Kuro realizes his new glasses are incredibly useful for recording kills and securing reward money. The monstrous beast lets out a terrifying screech as it aggressively prepares to strike. Gripping his blade tightly, Kuro stares down his very first monster while Shiro yells at him to keep his guard up. The grotesque monster lunges forward with a vicious snarl, popping out from the shadows. Kuro swiftly dashes directly into the creature's path and delivers a brutal, cleanly executed slash. As deep rumbling echoes through the cavern, Shiro urgently warns Kuro that another beast is already charging their way. A fiery Kekra emerges from the darkness, threatening to shoot lethal pillars of flame from whatever it touches. Channeling his newly acquired magical abilities, Kuro fiercely commands the ice element to freeze his fiery opponent. A powerful blast of freezing air instantly encases the beast in solid ice, stopping it dead in its tracks. Shiro happily praises Kuro's exceptional combat skills, deeply impressed by how well he handles his very first dungeon dive. Stomping forward to smash his frozen prey, Kuro realizes the immense power of system adjustments makes combat completely different from his old world. He glares fiercely into the surrounding darkness, completely unfazed by the growing threat lurking just out of sight. Noticing a massive horde of monsters gathering ahead, Kuro fearlessly leaps directly into the chaotic fray. He swiftly dispatches multiple beasts with a barrage of powerful, thudding strikes that echo through the cavern. Watching him charge headlong into the thickest part of the battle, Shiro frantically warns Kuro that he is pushing into highly dangerous territory. Shiro rapidly casts an endowment spell, chanting for a smooth haze to turn into a blade capable of eradicating evil gods. Kuro immediately feels his blade become significantly sharper and more durable as Shiro's powerful support magic takes hold. Gripping his enhanced weapon, he resolves that he harbors no hatred toward the monsters, but he absolutely must survive until he can see Tawa again. Driven by pure desperation and a refusal to die, Kuro unleashes an incredible flurry of devastating attacks. Amazed by his lethal efficiency, Shiro asks if he was a soldier in his past life, but Kuro humbly replies he was just a simple hoodlum. Kuro smoothly slices through the cavern air, turning his glowing blade into a blur of deadly motion. A blinding flash of light erupts as Kuro quietly admits to himself that he is handling swordplay and magic surprisingly better than he ever expected. A system interface pops up confirming Kuro leveled up from 1 to 2, prompting a cheerful congratulation from his guide. Noting they have impressively reached the 4th floor, Shiro suggests they call it quits for the day, but a highly energized Kuro insists he is up for more. Kuro suddenly spins around, noticing that despite her vast experience, Shiro seems completely overwhelmed by his relentless pace. Turning his full attention to her, Kuro steps closer and asks with genuine concern if she is feeling all right. Shiro suddenly collapses forward with a weak moan, forcing Kuro to rush in and catch her falling body. Holding her gently, Kuro apologizes for selfishly ignoring her stamina, but Shiro insists she can walk and firmly suggests they head back. Her face burning bright red, an embarrassed Shiro aggressively demands to be put down while Kuro innocently asks if she has caught a fever. A sudden, violent impact forcefully rocks the cavern, startling them both into high alert. Hearing ominous drips of blood from below, Shiro grimly recalls the entrance guards mentioning another group had entered the dungeon before them. Realizing the other group is currently fighting a dangerous battle just below, a deadly serious Shiro selfishly demands that Kuro head back immediately to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. Surrounded by chaotic visions of his past, Kuro reflects on his lack of decency in his previous life and admits he has no intention of becoming a good person in this new world. Staring ahead with unwavering resolve, he declares that he will only do what he believes is right and refuses to let her proceed alone. Guiding them through the frozen cavern, Kuro strictly orders Shiro to follow his instructions to stay alive, prompting her to earnestly promise her cooperation. He warns her that whatever dangers they encounter beyond this point will not be a mystery. The duo finally descends into the freezing depths of the dungeon's 6th floor. Discussing the strange sounds and the illogical reasons another group would venture this deep for mere reward money, the trio is suddenly startled by a gruesome discovery. They stumble upon a horrifying, mummified corpse sprawled across the icy ground. Shock and disgust wash over their faces as they realize the adventurer was brutally burned to death. Peering through the lingering smoke, Kuro questions why a small child is wandering around such a deadly battlefield. The smoke clears to reveal a monstrous, winged beast standing triumphantly over the charred remains of its victims. Shiro intensely panics and warns Kuro that they are facing a catastrophic threat. Realizing the creature holds a magical tool, Kuro braces himself for an unexpected and deadly sudden boss fight. Staring down the imposing beast, Kuro feels the familiar crushing weight of impending death wash over him once more. He grimly observes the terrified slave children forced to confront the beast, cementing his realization that Arculia operates on brutal principles vastly different from Earth. The monster flashes a horrifying, jagged smile as it prepares to slaughter its tiny prey. Kuro fully accepts the harsh reality of this parallel universe. Watching in sheer disbelief, Kuro realizes that mere children are being used as fodder to fight the magic tool-wielding monster. Standing safely in the distance, a smug nobleman callously orders the children to die just to buy him a few more minutes to charge his magic. Watching the nobleman hide far away from the carnage, Shiro asks if those poor children are his slaves. Trembling with swords in hand, the child slaves are bound by Arculia's cruel system that forces them to obey their noble master's suicidal commands. The crazed nobleman reveals his vile plan to sacrifice his slaves as mere tools to weaken the monster so he can claim the magic weapon and boost his own reputation. With no choice but to obey, the young boy cries out in terror as the massive beast lunges directly at him. The monstrous creature ruthlessly swats the fragile boy through the air with a devastating spray of blood. The girl screams in horror as her companion violently crashes into the icy ground. While the little girl cries over her fallen friend, the enraged nobleman screams at her to use her magic to draw the beast's deadly attention. Looming over the helpless girl, the beast prepares to strike while the master shouts that her worthless life is only meant to buy him a single second. The demonic beast unleashes a blood-curdling roar as it readies its final blow. A sudden, powerful incantation echoes through the cavern, demanding to be turned into a blade that eradicates evil gods. The ferocious creature swings its massive tail to crush the little girl into paste. Moving with blinding speed, Kuro intercepts the deadly strike and snatches the young girl out of harm's way. Safely setting the trembling child down near Shiro, Kuro flashes a confident grin and casually notes that his rescue maneuver went perfectly. Meeting Shiro's gaze, he orders a swift retreat, declaring there is absolutely no reason to linger in the danger zone. As blinding light and furious roars erupt from the frustrated beast, Kuro quickly checks to ensure the rescued girl is unharmed. The enraged monster retaliates by unleashing a massive torrent of hellfire, forcing Kuro to leap backwards while Shiro shields the child. Separated by a blazing wall of flames, Kuro kneels on the scorched earth and shouts back to Shiro that he is perfectly fine. Assuring his companions of his safety, he glares through the roaring fire at the monstrous threat before him. Analyzing the beast's aggressive surprise attack, he deduces that they have thoroughly enraged the creature. Realizing that escape is no longer a viable option, Kuro steps purposefully toward the inferno. Drawing his blades with lethal intent, he accepts that they have absolutely no choice but to slay the beast. With a dark, confident smirk, Kuro strides fearlessly through the smoke to face the towering boss alone. Leaping gracefully into the air, Kuro unleashes a dual onslaught of ice and torrential magic, sending a barrage of frozen projectiles toward his enemy. The magical barrage strikes the beast with explosive force, but its severed arm instantly regenerates, prompting Kuro to realize he must rely on his sword just like before. Kuro stares in absolute shock as the creature's grotesque, razor-sharp claw completely regenerates before his eyes, dripping with dark fluids. Realizing this regenerating beast is the special entity Shiro warned him about, Kuro is suddenly interrupted by an arrogant voice screaming at him. A pompous nobleman points his ornate staff directly at Kuro's chest, furiously accusing the young man of suddenly appearing to steal his glorious achievement. Slowly turning his head, Kuro locks eyes with the nobleman, delivering a terrifying, blood-curdling glare radiating pure lethal intent. The nobleman stammers about his high status but quickly freezes in pure terror, nervously demanding to know if Kuro's menacing silence is a form of mockery. Suddenly, a hidden magical device violently triggers, launching a deadly cluster of sharp, crystalline spikes directly toward the distracted nobleman. Exploiting the chaotic distraction, the massive, hairy beast violently bursts through the smoke and churning water with a thunderous roar. A massive projectile brutally impales the screaming nobleman straight through his chest, violently knocking him to the ground in a spray of blood. Hearing the nobleman fall, Kuro swiftly turns his attention back to the beast just as several massive spikes shoot dangerously close past his own body. Kuro desperately sprints across the cavern, nimbly dodging a relentless, high-speed barrage of deadly projectiles tearing through the stone walls around him. Glancing back at the relentless assault, Kuro quickly deduces that the monster's defense perfectly reacts to whatever is in its line of sight, leaving absolutely no frontal openings. Using his incredible agility, Kuro forcefully leaps off a crumbling rock pillar and launches himself high into the air to change his tactical approach. Soaring high above the chaotic battlefield, Kuro readies his glowing blade and decisively locks his sights on the beast's exposed neck. Utilizing the jagged rock formations to mask his descent, he rapidly dives down toward the creature's blind spot with his weapon drawn. At the very last second, the terrifying beast violently snaps its head around with a wicked, toothy grin, proving it perfectly tracked Kuro's every move. Kuro curses in sheer shock right before a massive, club-like appendage viciously smacks him squarely in the chest with bone-crushing force. A deeply panicked Shiro screams Kuro's name as a massive rumble shakes the cavern, signaling the young boy has once again taken a brutal, life-threatening blow. The sheer impact serves as a brutal reminder of this parallel world's unforgiving, deadly principles. Kuro's consciousness violently detaches from his body, leaving him drifting in a white, data-filled void as he dazedly wonders where he is. Floating aimlessly through the strange digital expanse, he questions what exactly he is doing trapped in this ethereal space. He suddenly spots a familiar silhouette standing in the digital matrix and desperately calls out to his sister Tawa. Tawa slowly turns her head to face him, revealing a deeply sorrowful expression with large tears continuously streaming down her cheeks. Kuro stares in heartbroken shock at her sorrowful expression, gently calling her name as he realizes she is crying. Standing a short distance away in the glowing void, Tawa finally speaks, admitting she has something very important she needs to tell him. Kuro desperately reaches his hand out toward her fading figure, begging his sister to wait before she disappears again. His blood-stained hand violently snaps back into reality, reaching hopelessly toward the dark cavern ceiling instead of his sister. Opening his eyes to the grim, blood-soaked reality of the dungeon, Kuro sheds a single tear and laments what a cruel dream he just experienced. Kuro realizes he is in a truly desperate situation after taking a massive, direct blow from the creature's powerful magic tool. The grotesque beast lifts the lifeless body of the nobleman and violently crushes him between its massive jaws, squeezing the blood from his corpse. Roaring in absolute, terrifying delight, the monster gleefully swallows its grisly, blood-soaked meal. Slowly rising to his feet, a severely injured Kuro glares at the creature with intense, murderous hatred and curses the foul monster. Clutching his severe wounds, Kuro mockingly apologizes to the beast, stating he still has things he must accomplish before he can be eaten. Staring death in the face, he firmly vows that even if his body breaks and his magic runs dry, he absolutely will not give up. A heavy, echoing thud violently shakes the ground as Kuro firmly plants his foot and prepares for a final, desperate clash. The massive beast lunges forward with a terrifying roar, completely oblivious to the survival knife suddenly buried deep within its glowing eye. Kuro weakly taps his foot and exhales a sigh of relief over the close call, listening to the blinded monster scream in absolute, agonizing pain. Covered in his own blood and slumped against a rock, Kuro looks over in complete surprise to find an incredibly anxious Shiro kneeling right beside him. A desperate, teary-eyed Shiro frantically orders him not to move, leaving a deeply confused Kuro to ask why she is looking at him like that. Desperately trying to save the rescued child, Shiro unleashes a powerful radiance healing spell. Blinding light erupts from Shiro's hands as she pours her magical energy into the wounded girl. Watching the intense magical display, Kuro silently observes the miraculous healing process. Shiro warns him that she can only apply basic first aid, urging Kuro to prepare for an immediate escape as soon as the girl can move. Tears streaming down her face, the little girl begs them to hurry up and leave her behind to save themselves. Blaming her own selfishness for the dire situation, the child insists there is absolutely no reason for them to risk their lives staying by her side. Bleeding from his own wounds, Kuro calmly rejects her plea and reminds Shiro that she has already done more than enough as their guide. Flashing a determined smile, Shiro reiterates that letting him die now would be an absolute waste. Shiro tearfully confesses she has seen other visitors with his exact same eyes, noting that they all eventually found normal, happy lives. She passionately declares that Arculia is a place of rebirth, a world specifically designed to change people for the better. Driven by her unwavering belief in this world, Shiro stubbornly refuses to abandon him. With tears streaming down her face, she desperately pleads for Kuro to find his own happiness too. The touching moment is violently shattered when the towering beast suddenly lunges from the shadows, prompting Kuro to scream for Shiro to move. Before she can react, the monstrous creature viciously swats Shiro across the cavern with a sickening smack. Thrown violently into the icy terrain, Shiro groans in agony as she struggles to remain conscious. Realizing he is completely weaponless but somewhat mobile thanks to Shiro's healing, Kuro frantically searches for a way to fight back. Staring down the roaring beast, he desperately calculates how he can possibly grab Shiro and escape the inferno. Just as all hope seems lost, a sudden system chime startles Kuro as an unexpected menu message arrives from Jiro. The magical equipment merchant apologizes for the delay and reveals he finally found an ancient description regarding Kuro's mysterious black attribute. An attached file contains a crucial passage extracted straight from a text detailing the mythic times. The cryptic ancient text explains that the black attribute possesses the ultimate ability to combine absolutely everything and convert it directly into power for the user. Jiro casually signs off by telling Kuro to take it easy and enjoy his long life ahead, completely oblivious to the deadly situation. Smirking through the pain, Kuro chuckles at the merchant's absurd timing and the ironic wish for a long life. Drawing newfound resolve, he mentally lists all the mundane errands he still needs to finish, including paying Shiro back for their shopping trip. Accepting the irony that he previously wanted to die, Kuro confidently declares to the roaring beast that he now has far too much to live for. Channeling his awakened power, a massive, swirling aura of pure darkness violently erupts from the ground beneath his feet. Locking his glowing eyes on the terrifying monster, Kuro calmly promises to annihilate it before completing his to-do list. Struggling to lift her head, Shiro stares in absolute shock at the overwhelming vortex of black magic consuming her partner. She immediately realizes that Kuro must have finally comprehended the true, terrifying nature of his unique color attribute. Through sheer comprehension of his innate magic, Kuro bypasses artificial equipment to forge a power governed entirely by his own will. Seizing total control over the raw energy, the young adventurer actively commands the darkness to take a physical shape. Unleashing the same rare attribute class held by legendary heroes, Kuro prepares to demonstrate the true, devastating value of his color. The divine ability bestowed upon him finally activates, allowing him to gather the infinite darkness and govern it as a lethal weapon. Embracing his dark potential, the swirling shadows begin to condense and harden across his injured body. Demanding a form perfectly suited for slaughtering the beast, Kuro commands the black magic to forge his ultimate armor. With a silent command, the shadows seamlessly fuse with his physical being to complete the darkness unification process. The system window confirms his transformation, officially declaring the activation of his exclusive Dark Authority skill. Clad in pitch-black, jagged armor, Kuro takes a heavy, imposing step forward to confront the boss. Trembling as she watches the impossible transformation, Shiro marvels at the sheer physical manifestation of the black color attribute. Relieved that Shiro is safely out of range, the sinisterly armored Kuro cracks his knuckles and prepares to brutally execute the monster without holding back. Staring down the mighty beast, Kuro realizes he must change tactics and prepares a dark new strategy. Channeling his sinister energy, he loudly invokes the spell Black Funeral. The system confirms he has acquired new skills and the annexation ability, leaving him shocked that his wounds are magically healing. Declaring that his previous assault was not enough, Kuro pulls a surging manifestation of darkness from his own hand. With a swift motion, he draws a lethal sword forged entirely out of pure black energy. Shiro watches in absolute terror as the beast roars at the sight of Kuro's unnatural weapon. Gripping his dark blade, Kuro launches himself forward with an explosive blast of speed. He aggressively dashes through the cavern, leaving a blazing trail of dark energy in his wake. His fierce new power completely swallows the surrounding elements, including the enemy's magical fire. The desperate beast unleashes a relentless, high-speed barrage of sharp projectiles toward its attacker. Moving with incredible agility, Kuro effortlessly jumps and weaves through the deadly volley. Gliding through the air, he confidently notes that he has finally gotten the hang of his newly enhanced body. With his sights locked on the creature, Kuro fiercely swears to completely eradicate the monster. He rapidly formulates a plan to use darkness unification for armor while attacking with Black Funeral. Radiating intense power, he vows to brutally slice up absolutely anything that stands in his way. Kuro unleashes a devastating, shadow-consuming strike called Dark Eater. He watches in awe as the dark magic violently swallows the monster's body parts and rapidly increases his own power. The system prompts him to confirm the absorption and conversion of the beast's magical tool via decomposition. An ornate ring clatters to the ground, leaving Kuro to wonder if this simple item will truly allow him to meet the kingdom's heroes. Shiro frantically runs across the cavern and calls out his name to check if he is unharmed. Flustered and stammering, she struggles to find her words as Kuro casually asks if she is all right. Suddenly, a ragged and bloodied young girl steps out from the shadows and desperately begs to become their slave. The terrified child frantically lists her skills, offering to clean toilets, tend livestock, cook, and even use magic. Trembling violently, the desperate girl promises to do absolutely anything if they just take her with them. Utterly exhausted from her ordeal, the frail girl collapses onto Shiro's lap. Kuro rationally points out that since the girl's noble master is dead, they might be able to handle her ownership using their reward money. Resigning himself to the situation, Kuro softly states that they will do whatever they can to help her. Shiro giggles warmly, noting that she is finally starting to figure out what kind of kind-hearted person he truly is. Looking up toward the cavern exit, she cheerfully suggests they head back to the surface first. As they begin their ascent, the young boy who once ended his own life resolves to figure out their next steps. Stepping out of the dark dungeon, Kuro feels the gentle wind and warm sunlight of this new world on his face. For the first time in his second life, the young boy walks forward with his own meaningful goals. A few days later, a mysterious individual receives a system notification confirming an elimination at a snowy mountain temple. An unseen speaker casually remarks that cleaning up the recent mess took quite a bit of time. They discuss a shocking rumor that a brand new arrival in this world managed to defeat a magic tool holder near the capital. A floating girl maliciously hopes the newcomer is female, stating she absolutely despises savage men. Meanwhile, Kuro's thoughts drift back to a lingering image of his beloved sister Tawa. The fragmented memory reveals a striking, determined glimpse of the young girl's face. The narrative confirms that Kusuke Kurono, the avenger who took his own life, has fully awakened in Arculia. Overlooking a sprawling, magnificent city, he embraces his new reality in a storytale world of swords and magic. Reflecting on the brutal reality of Arculia, Kuro notes that the world lives in constant fear of monsters invading the surface. Sitting quietly in his room, Kuro realizes that despite its glaring issues, he genuinely prefers this dangerous new world over his previous one. Meanwhile, the rescued little girl sleeps peacefully in a sunlit bed, finally safe from the horrors of the dungeon. Exhausted from her traumatic ordeal, she lets out light snores as she rests under the warm covers. Watching her rest, Kuro finds solace in the fact that he was able to successfully save at least one innocent person in this unforgiving world. Later that evening, the local pub is bursting with energy as cheerful waitresses carry massive platters of food and drinks to the rowdy patrons. The lively atmosphere of the tavern hums in the background as the celebration continues. Clinking their heavy wooden mugs together, the adventurers loudly toast to the newcomer Kuro for successfully securing the powerful magic tool. Sitting awkwardly amidst the cheering crowd, Kuro quietly asks Shiro if it is really okay for them to spend so much money on a celebration. Kuro admits a simple thank you would have sufficed, but Shiro smiles warmly and assures him that the generous pub is incredibly grateful for his heroic efforts. Hearty laughter erupts across the bar as the bald adventurer thanks Jiro for the life-saving message while others eagerly join the drinking festivities. When a curious patron asks about their dynamic, Kuro humbly insists he hasn't done nearly enough to repay Shiro for constantly helping him out. Startling everyone in the tavern, Kuro suddenly scoops a highly embarrassed Shiro into a princess carry because she looked exhausted. Blushing furiously, Shiro violently punches Kuro in the face and calls him an idiot for doing something so embarrassing in front of the entire pub. Rubbing his bruised cheek, Kuro listens as a flustered patron desperately tries to convince the laughing crowd that he is actually an incredibly earnest person. Leaning back against the bar counter, Kuro smiles softly to himself as he realizes this lively, chaotic atmosphere feels wonderfully nostalgic. The playful banter continues as a patron remarks on Shiro's popularity, momentarily darkening the mood by comparing the scene to the days when Tawa was still alive. A striking waitress with a sharp bob cut introduces herself as Vinern, cheerfully offering to let Kuro call her Vinny. Kuro politely introduces himself as a guest staying on the second floor, but Vinny smirks and reveals she already knows him because he is quite famous around town. Vinny correctly guesses he is just sightseeing since he recently arrived, noting that the grand ceremony for the magic tool offering is exactly 1 week away. Taking advantage of her friendly demeanor, Kuro quietly asks Vinny to tell him exactly what kind of person Shiro truly is. Vinny playfully teases him about having a crush, but Kuro quickly clarifies he only wants to know why a girl like Shiro ended up working as a local guide. Recommending he just spend more time with Shiro and ask her directly, Vinny listens as Kuro admits he desperately wants to repay Shiro for all her invaluable help. Their conversation is abruptly cut short when another patron calls Kuro over to the bar, prompting Vinny to wave a cheerful goodbye. Stepping away from the noisy crowd, Kuro finds Shiro in a quiet hall where she eagerly announces she has a special surprise to show him. The rescued little girl timidly steps out from hiding, fully bathed and dressed in a beautiful new outfit. Kuro stares in absolute shock at the massive transformation, openly marveling at how completely different and healthy she looks. A brief flashback reveals that their party successfully negotiated with a corrupt noble family to legally transfer ownership of the young slave girl. The group managed to secure her freedom by proving that the deceased noble had dragged his slaves into the deadly dungeon entirely on his own reckless volition. Remembering their earlier conversation on the snowy road, Kuro recalls asking the trembling child for her name only to be horrified when she introduced herself as a mere number. Refusing to accept a number as a name, Kuro gently asked what her parents originally called her, prompting her to whisper the name Ikona. Snapping back to the present, Kuro warmly informs Ikona that he and Shiro have arranged for her to work at the pub as a free employee rather than a slave. Admitting that his recent arrival to this world makes him an unreliable guardian, Kuro instead offers to be her genuine friend. He confidently assures her that anyone who survived serving such a monstrous noble will have absolutely no trouble handling the busy pub. Overwhelmed by his kindness, Ikona breaks down in tears and confesses the traumatic execution of her parents that forced her into slavery. Sobbing helplessly about her uncertain future, she is comforted by Kuro's gentle promise that they will figure out her new life together. Ikona tearfully stops herself from calling him master and instead thanks him profusely, to which Kuro smiles and insists she just use his real name. Wiping away her tears, Ikona flashes a brilliant, heartwarming smile and happily addresses him as Kasuk. As Shiro cheerfully calls Ikona back to work, Kuro watches the happy girl run off and solemnly vows to save as many suffering people as he possibly can. The heartwarming moment is suddenly shattered by a violent, echoing slam from across the room. A severely injured man huffs heavily as he leans against a doorway, prompting a surprised onlooker to ask who is there. The battered man, identified as Taiga, collapses to the wooden floor with a heavy thud while panicked bystanders rush to help carry him. Panting heavily on the ground, it is revealed that Taiga is a local raider and a regular patron, prompting someone to ask if they know him. Observing his solitary return, the group grimly deduces that Taiga and his 5 comrades had gone out to challenge the Guardian. Someone questions the term Guardian, noting that the country normally dispatches powerful heroes to eliminate the magic tool holder deep within the evil area. A grim realization sets in as they connect this terrifying magic tool holder to the Kurizen Mimiosu they previously fought. A trembling, bloodied Taiga admits they were utterly foolish to think they could challenge the Guardian on their own. Taiga recounts that the monstrous entity possessed overwhelming power, opting to cruelly toy with them like prey instead of killing them instantly. The terrifying, shadowy silhouette of Green's guardian, Sagers, looms ominously over the slain bodies of Taiga's fallen comrades. Trembling with residual fear, Taiga describes the monstrous guardian as a brutal, unforgiving killer. Shocked by his miraculous survival, the onlookers frantically ask Taiga why he is the only one left alive and what happened to the rest of the team. Taiga reveals the horrifying truth that the beast ruthlessly slaughtered Mio, Cruz, and Hannah right in front of him after it finished toying with them. With a wicked, mocking grin, the monster grabbed Kurara in one hand and simply faded into the darkness. Overcome with grief and desperation, Taiga begs for healing magic so he can immediately re-enter the dungeon, despite warnings that it is far too dangerous. The group firmly warns Taiga that even if his physical wounds heal, his magical power will not recover quickly, leaving Kurara's fate looking incredibly grim. Clenching his fists in sheer desperation, Taiga tearfully insists he must go back to retrieve his comrades' bodies even if the chances are slim. Driven by pure anguish and survivor's guilt, a bloodied Taiga fiercely declares he will face Sagirisu again even if it costs him his own life. A solemn, heavy silence falls over the group as they process Taiga's heartbreaking resolve. Suddenly, a determined voice breaks the tension, firmly stating that he will go in Taiga's place. Everyone turns in absolute shock to see Kuro stepping forward with a serious, unwavering expression. With absolute conviction burning in his eyes, Kuro declares that he will enter the Green Dungeon himself. Standing outside a grand building the next day, Shiro casually notes that Kuro seems completely unfazed by the terrifying stories they heard. Kuro checks if everyone is ready to go, prompting a rugged adventurer to playfully demand a round of beer as repayment once the mission is complete. With their resolve steeled, the party officially sets out toward the highly dangerous Green Evil area. Kuro expresses gratitude for a spare coat made of magic-resistant material, noting it will be excellent for reducing incoming magical damage. As the group questions the necessity of bringing Shiro into such extreme danger, she firmly asserts that she has her own personal reasons for coming along. A bittersweet flashback shows the fallen comrades happily drinking together, revealing that Shiro had personally guided them around Arculia just like she did for Kuro. A deeply troubled Shiro admits she cannot just sit back and let this tragedy go, emphasizing her strong personal desire to see the mission through. Kuro listens quietly, recognizing that Shiro always thinks deeply about the well-being of others. Suddenly, the rapid pitter-patter of tiny boots interrupts their departure as a frantic voice calls out for them to wait. Ikona rushes forward, desperately begging to be taken along and promising she can be highly useful with her various magic skills. Kuro gently but firmly rejects her plea, explaining that the upcoming dungeon is far too dangerous and he cannot afford to put her at risk. A heartbroken Ikona stammers that she just wants to repay their constant kindness, prompting Kuro to suddenly ask if she likes fish. Kuro fondly recalls eating simmered and grilled fish in his old world, suggesting Ikona could best help by adding similar fish dishes to the local pub's menu. Ikona's eyes light up with immense excitement as she enthusiastically promises to whip up some delicious fish dishes for their return. Stepping forward nervously, Ikona softly calls out Kusuk's name as he prepares to leave. With a bright, tearful smile, Ikona wishes him to be careful out there and eagerly looks forward to seeing him soon. Watching her wave goodbye, Kuro reflects that given her harsh past as a slave, he just wants her to safely get used to her new environment without feeling like a burden. The scene suddenly shifts as a mysterious, sharp-eyed individual named Quinn makes an unexpected appearance. Perched elegantly on a tree branch, the mysterious Quinn casually apologizes before taking her leave, leaving Kuro to confusedly wonder why she was there. Strolling along a sunlit ridge, the bald warrior asks Kuro what he is trying to achieve by entering the dangerous Green Dungeon besides earning fear and pain. Staring intensely at him, Shiro questions if Kuro is secretly plunging into these deadly depths because he actually wants to become a hero. Clenching his fist with a grim expression, Kuro firmly denies having any interest whatsoever in playing the role of a hero. The bald warrior points out that while a capable fighter like Kuro might survive, the arrogant noble from yesterday foolishly challenged a guardian and absolutely deserved his gruesome fate. Ignoring the deadly warnings, Kuro stares ahead with unyielding resolve and declares that he still wants to try even if it might be too late to save someone. When questioned if that is enough of a reason to risk his life, Kuro confidently states that he is doing it simply because he believes it is the right thing to do. The bald adventurer warmly smirks at his noble resolve, and Kuro playfully adds that he is also doing it because he expects a free beer as a reward. The light-hearted conversation is abruptly cut short when distant voices angrily yell for Kuro to hurry up before they leave him behind. Clad in his striking white and black armored coat, Kuro stands silently on a dirt path gazing out over the sprawling, unfamiliar wilderness. Annoyed by the sudden departure of his companions, Kuro sighs and mutters to himself about someone constantly disappearing without a trace. A lingering warning echoes in Kuro's mind, cautioning him that his raw black magic will eventually consume him if he uses it incorrectly. The party finally arrives at the imposing entrance of a massive, ancient stone temple heavily overgrown with thick vines and wild foliage. Standing before a deep descent, the bald warrior double-checks if Kuro is truly prepared to dive all the way down to the treacherous 13th floor to find Sagurus. Descending into the cavern, Kuro stares in absolute shock at the sprawling, vibrant underground jungle thriving beneath the surface. The bald warrior advises Kuro to cast aside surface logic, explaining that this impossible, overgrown flora is exactly why this place is called the Green Dungeon. Emerging from the thick undergrowth, a terrifying swarm of massive insect monsters immediately blocks their path. Gripping his weapon tightly, the bald warrior grimly warns that these creatures are significantly stronger than the intermediate enemies they faced in yesterday's dungeon. Springing into action with a fierce battle cry, the warrior unleashes a devastating magical command to shatter the approaching beasts. Stepping confidently toward a towering centipede, Shiro raises her hands and tries to peacefully explain that she is not their enemy. Her diplomatic facade instantly shatters into a shrieking panic as she realizes they are giant bugs, a creature she absolutely despises. Swinging his massive halberd with brutal efficiency, the bald warrior effortlessly slices through the swarm of giant centipedes to protect the terrified guide. Ignoring the frantic battle entirely, Kuro casually strolls right past the giant monsters, prompting his confused companions to scream at him to attack. Without breaking his stride, Kuro silently channels his dark aura and activates his devastating black attribute. A terrifying vortex of pure darkness violently erupts from the ground, mercilessly devouring everything in its path. Unleashing his lethal magic, dozens of razor-sharp black spikes violently pierce through the dungeon air. The chaotic battlefield instantly falls dead silent as Kuro's dark spikes impale and effortlessly eradicate the entire swarm of monsters. Staring at the brutal carnage in absolute shock, the bald warrior mutters that Kuro's dark magic looks vastly different from the powers described in legendary heroic tales. He explains that a popular historical book detailing the Great Demon War features a legendary, powerful figure known as the Black Hero. When Kuro asks if she knows the story, Shiro confirms it is a famous tale but dismisses the Black Hero's depiction as mere artistic imagination. Shiro describes the fictional Black Hero as a fiercely righteous young man who selflessly fights demons to protect humanity. Flashing a dark, self-deprecating smirk, Kuro flatly states that the heroic savior in the story is nothing like him because he just does whatever he pleases. Startled by his sudden, out-of-character amusement, his companions pause in the cavern and ask why he is laughing. The bald warrior's expression darkens as he reveals another grim detail about the legend involving the white hero losing their memories. He solemnly adds that the tragic myth also ends with the Black Hero completely losing his sense of self to the darkness. The warrior notes that while the fictionalized story differs from the actual religious scriptures of Arculia, the most prominent detail remains the tragic deaths of the heroes. According to the legendary myth, both the white and black heroes magnificently sacrificed their lives in a final stand to defeat the evil god. The dark history lesson also cryptically mentions the existence of a third, mysterious dark hero alongside the legendary duo. Walking deeper into the vibrant cavern, Kuro silently processes the ominous tale surrounding the final moments of the legendary Black Hero. The solemn conversation is violently interrupted when a terrified shout warns Kuro of a sudden ambush from above. Reacting with blinding speed, Kuro immediately unleashes his deadly black burial technique to eradicate the descending threat. Slashing through another monstrous enemy, Kuro clicks his tongue in sheer annoyance as the relentless horde just keeps coming. Channeling his shadowy magic, he viciously unleashes the devastating Dark Eater technique to annihilate his foes. A heavy thud echoes through the cavern as Kuro's system interface silently registers a slight increase in his mental pollution status. Watching Kuro dispatch the beasts with incredible magical proficiency, Shiro breathes a sigh of relief as they finally approach the last floor. Kuro glances at his interface in mild concern, noting that his mental pollution level has ticked slightly higher than before. Stepping forward to heal Kuro's wounded hand, a deeply grateful Shiro warmly thanks him again for bringing them this far. Smiling softly, she gently holds his hand and promises that they will make it back alive with Kurara and everyone else. Caught off guard by her earnest gratitude, Kuro stares back at her in stunned silence. Shaking off his apprehension, he decides his fluctuating mental status is nothing to worry about right now as the corruption number unexpectedly drops. The party finally arrives at a massive, ancient set of doors marking the deepest section of the 13th floor. Pushing the heavy doors open, an anxious Shiro gasps and confirms that the fearsome Sagyurusu is definitely waiting inside. Stepping into the vast chamber, Taiga freezes in utter shock as he spots Kurara sitting motionlessly in the center of the room. Desperately calling out her name, Taiga sprints across the desolate floor to reach his missing comrade. Tears streaming down his face, he frantically apologizes for leaving her behind and begs to know if she is injured. Instead of answering, Kurara violently trembles and lets out a chilling, broken stream of manic laughter. Utterly horrified by her unnatural behavior, Taiga stares down at the girl in sheer, paralyzed confusion. Suddenly, torches violently ignite around the dark chamber as a booming voice gleefully welcomes the three visitors for finally curing its boredom. Glancing around the massive, root-infested arena, Kuro recoils in shock as a suffocating, sinister atmosphere instantly fills the room. A towering, shadowy entity slowly materializes, inviting them to experience the dread of its twisted palace of joy and pleasure. The terrifying guardian of the Green Dungeon officially introduces itself as Sagyurusu do Mirarudo. Sweating under the intense pressure, Kuro realizes this highly intelligent monster is entirely different from the mindless beast he fought previously. Glaring fiercely at the skeletal monstrosity, Kuro coldly demands to know exactly what the bastard did to the young girl. Boiling with absolute rage, Taiga readies his heavy axe and furiously screams at the guardian to explain Kurara's condition. Recognizing Taiga from the previous day, the sinister skeleton flashes a wicked, taunting grin as sharp roots suddenly burst from the ground. Taiga screams in agony as thick, pale vines violently ensnare his limbs, with Sagyurusu laughing that it specifically let him escape just so he would bring back fresh prey. Before the roots can crush the warrior, Kuro furiously lunges forward and violently shatters the wooden bindings with a devastating, explosive strike. Regaining his footing, Taiga frantically warns Kuro and Shiro to watch out as several grotesque, plant-like humanoid figures suddenly emerge from the shadows. The terrifying wooden monstrosities let out a blood-curdling shriek as they charge relentlessly toward the party. Staring closely at the twisted face of the approaching monster, a horrified Taiga realizes it bears the exact likeness of his fallen comrade Kurusu. Completely paralyzed by the shocking discovery, Taiga nearly takes a lethal blow before Shiro frantically screams for him to dodge. Another grotesque plant creature lunges into the light, causing Shiro to gasp in terror as she recognizes the mutilated face of their friend Hana. Chuckling darkly at their absolute despair, the sadistic guardian proudly asks how they like his highly artistic new creations. Noting Kurara's broken mental state, Sagyurusu gleefully explains that he embeds his saplings inside human corpses to create perfect, mindless puppets overnight. Spreading its massive, skeletal arms, the monstrous guardian arrogantly demands that the party appreciate the sheer beauty of his twisted craftsmanship. Refusing to let Taiga hesitate against his desecrated friends, Kuro violently smacks the warrior and reminds him that they came here to save Kurara. A sudden, brutal impact sends Shiro crashing hard against the jagged stone floor. As Shiro collapses, the grotesque wooden puppets leap high into the air to deliver a fatal, synchronized plunging attack. Moving with lightning speed, Kuro seamlessly swoops in and catches Shiro midair just before the deadly wooden stakes can pierce her body. Holding Shiro safely, Kuro yells at Taiga to focus on their primary mission, promising he will use his dark magic to safely consume the corrupted remains of their friends so they can be mourned properly. Standing firmly before the monstrous guardian, Kuro fiercely reminds Taiga that they came all this way for one single reason, to rescue Kurara. Refusing to allow any more casualties, Kuro fiercely blocks a sudden, invisible attack with a loud whoosh. He firmly stands his ground and activates his ultimate black unification technique. A heavy metallic clang echoes through the cavern as Kuro violently clashes his dark weapon against a monstrous, skeletal entity. Glaring at the horrifying creature, Kuro angrily curses the bastard for treating people's lives like a sick game while the monster recognizes his black attribute. Driven by intense disgust, Kuro vows to mercilessly slaughter anyone who plays with lives regardless of whether they are human or monster. A grim system window suddenly materializes in his vision, warning him that his dangerous mental pollution level is steadily rising. The deep narration reveals that these cursed demon grounds are exclusively managed by guardians who have received the dark favor of an evil god. Screeching with terrifying power, the skeletal entity asserts itself as a guardian, an apex existence fundamentally different from normal monsters trying to reach the surface. The imposing beast looms over the battlefield as the absolute ruler of the dungeon depths. With a deafening whoosh, the towering guardian unleashes a massive wave of raw energy. Hovering majestically amidst the chaos, the guardian questions what kind of bizarre being Kuro is to possess the legendary black attribute. The monster openly scoffs at Kuro's blatant arrogance, insulted that a mere human would dare to challenge its divine authority. The bald warrior desperately screams for Kuro to stop attacking because the monster has assimilated their missing companion Neo. Completely ignoring the plea, Kuro ruthlessly executes his deadly black burial technique to impale the beast with massive dark spikes. As his mental pollution climbs even higher, Kuro stubbornly continues his relentless assault while his panicked allies beg him to stop. Shielding a rescued girl named Kurara, the bald warrior orders a full retreat because fighting a guardian is nothing short of a suicide mission. While the warrior instructs his team to evacuate the wounded, Kuro stubbornly refuses to flee alongside them. Eyes wide with unhinged, homicidal rage, Kuro aggressively declares his absolute intent to kill the guardian himself. Shiro watches in pure shock as Kuro recklessly leaps straight toward the towering skeletal threat. Lunging furiously through the cavern air, Kuro prepares to violently clash with the screeching beast. The sadistic guardian laughs maniacally, thoroughly enjoying the magnificent sight of Kuro's pure, unbridled anger taking over. Taking advantage of his blind rage, the monster brutally retaliates and cleanly pierces Kuro's torso in midair. Swatting him away like a mindless beast, the guardian openly mocks Kuro's primitive and highly inelegant fighting style. The monster viciously slams the injured adventurer into the rocky ground, arrogantly declaring its absolute superiority. Kuro violently tumbles across the ancient ruins, his fresh wounds throbbing intensely as Shiro screams his name in terror. Gripping his knife tightly, Kuro forcefully scolds himself for letting blind emotion cloud his judgment and sabotage his ultimate goal. He mentally commands himself to completely seal away his heart and push through the bitter pain exactly like he did during his past revenge. Staring coldly at the ground, Kuro forces his mind to reset and demands himself to remember exactly how he executes his enemies. Taking a deep, steadying breath, the young warrior fully embraces the ruthless, calculating killer he truly is. Rising slowly to his feet, Kuro locks his chilling, dead eyes directly onto his monstrous target. Standing tall despite bleeding profusely, Kuro remains eerily silent as the guardian mockingly demands he try a bit harder. Bored with the one-sided fight, the arrogant guardian unleashes a massive, swirling baptism of fire to incinerate him. The colossal, roaring inferno surges aggressively toward the lone swordsman. As the flames engulf him, the shocked monster suddenly realizes Kuro is cleverly using his black attribute to absorb the devastating heat. Dark magic violently clashes with the fiery onslaught, effortlessly eating the guardian's ultimate attack. The skeletal guardian screeches in sheer panic as its own abilities are aggressively consumed by the spreading blackness. Horrified beyond belief, the guardian realizes Kuro has perfectly stolen and recreated its own unique power using his dark magic. Desperately backpedaling from the imposing human threat, the terrified monster begs Kuro to stop and calmly talk things out. Flashing a cold, psychopathic eye, Kuro flatly states that he is perfectly calm before bidding the monster a final goodbye. With a single, merciless swing of his newly formed dark scythe, Kuro launches a devastating execution strike to annihilate the begging guardian. A blood-curdling scream erupts through the cavern as the monstrous guardian violently shatters into countless pieces. Meanwhile, a digital interface quietly updates in the background, signaling that the user's mental pollution has ominously ticked up slightly. The grotesque wooden remains of the shattered beast rapidly dissolve into the surrounding air until absolutely nothing is left behind. Utterly exhausted from the brutal clash, a battered Kuro lowers his weapon and pants heavily in the sudden silence. Snapping out of his combat trance, Kuro turns to see a relieved Shiro and Taiga approaching with Kurara, praising him for single-handedly defeating Sagirusu. The brief moment of triumph is violently interrupted as a chorus of terrifying screeches suddenly echoes from the dark crevices of the arena. Glaring fiercely at a lingering shadow, Kuro coldly demands that the entity die quickly since it claimed to be bored to death. The decapitated skeletal head of Sagurasu materializes on the ground, mockingly admitting defeat and confessing that the human's power was genuinely terrifying. Despite its absolute loss, the severed head flashes a wicked grin and issues a chilling warning that the battle is not over. Taiga yells in utter disbelief that the monster still retains power as thick, jagged roots suddenly burst violently from the ruined floor. A terrified Shiro gasps while Kuro fiercely readies his blade against the surging roots, bracing for the evil god's final curse. Screaming a final declaration of death, the monstrous skull triggers a massive rumble that threatens to completely collapse the ancient Colosseum. Even as the arena violently shakes, the system notes that the Guardian is officially defeated and the surviving raiders are safely secured in Taiga's arms. Glancing warily at the crumbling ceiling, Kuro realizes that while it appears the heroes have triumphed over the villain, a new threat is already emerging. Shiro and Taiga look up in absolute horror, their terrified faces illuminated by an ominous glow as they question what is descending upon them. A massive, angry sphere of roaring flames descends directly into the dungeon, prompting the laughing skull to gleefully confirm that it is an artificial sun. The grinning skull explains that this blazing core serves as the dungeon's life source, providing the essential sunlight needed to nurture its monstrous plant creations. Mocking their temporary victory, Sagurasu reveals that new guardians will continually rise from his rotting remains to continue the cycle. Shouting a desperate command, Shiro hastily projects a glowing magical barrier to shield the group as the blazing sun threatens to incinerate everything in the chamber. Shiro frantically urges Kuro to escape the suffocating heat, while the roaring guardian gleefully commands them to rejoice as they are consumed by the life-giving fire. Slamming his heavy axe against the sealed exit, a panicked Taiga realizes the monster has absolutely no intention of letting them leave alive. The severed skull cackles maniacally, confirming that striking it down now will do absolutely nothing to stop the falling artificial sun. Ignoring Kuro's cold demand to die alone, the wicked guardian gleefully declares that their fate is permanently sealed as the lethal countdown begins. Despite his overwhelming exhaustion, Kuro vows they will survive and channels the massive dark energy he previously absorbed from the guardian. Leaping fiercely toward the blazing core, Kuro swings his shadowy blade and unleashes his devastating Dark Eater technique. The pitch-black magic violently collides with the blinding sphere of light, aggressively spreading across its burning surface in an attempt to devour it. To their absolute horror, the radiant heat completely overpowers Kuro's dark magic, instantly evaporating the attack before it can absorb the flames. Panting heavily as he plummets back to the ground, Kuro realizes the sheer size of the artificial sun makes it impossible to swallow quickly. Refusing to accept defeat, the battered boy fiercely resolves that he cannot afford to rest for even a single second. Channeling every ounce of his remaining power, Kuro unleashes a rapid, desperate barrage of shadowy projectiles directly into the roaring flames. Realizing his attacks are completely futile against the immense heat, Kuro curses in frustration while Taiga desperately suggests breaking through the sealed door. Frantically calculating his extremely limited options, Kuro debates using a dark shield or his other elemental attributes to block the lethal heat. Instantly discarding those defensive ideas as useless, Kuro forcefully launches himself back into the searing air for another desperate strike. His heartbeat pounding in his ears, Kuro pushes his limits to destroy the sun while his digital mental pollution gauge violently fluctuates. The intense psychological strain finally pushes his system over the absolute limit, triggering a critical mental contamination warning. Sensing a deeply terrifying shift in his aura, an incredibly anxious Shiro softly calls out the young boy's name. Dark, sinister wisps of chaotic energy suddenly erupt from Kuro's trembling body, causing a panicked Shiro to scream in fear. Kuro's consciousness is abruptly ripped from the blazing battlefield, leaving his avatar drifting aimlessly in a cold, silent void. Dazed and completely confused, he quickly deduces that the recent mental contamination warning is responsible for this bizarre hallucination. A massive, terrifying shadow slowly materializes in the digital darkness, leaving Kuro to nervously question the true nature of the ominous entity looming before him. Shocking Kuro to his core, a familiar voice suddenly echoes through the void and begs him not to take another step. Staring into the darkness, he is completely stunned to see the ghostly apparition of a girl who perfectly resembles Tawa. The mysterious phantom warns him that the terrifying power before him will completely strip away his sense of self if unlocked. Reaching out with a glowing hand, the illusion desperately pleads with him to turn back before it is too late. Snapping back to his harsh reality, Kuro quickly deduces that this phantom is merely an emotional illusion and not the real Tawa. Looming over him, a demonic manifestation of pure darkness forces Kuro to question if touching it will truly erase his identity. Staring down the imposing abyss, he hesitates for a brief moment to consider if this dark power is the only way to solve his deadly predicament. Pushing past his fear, Kuro ultimately resolves to embrace the terrifying risks if it means he can finally reunite with the real Tawa. With an intense glare of pure determination, Kuro reaches out to claim the corrupting shadows. A system notification suddenly chimes in his mind, officially confirming the acquisition of a lethal new magical skill called Dark Escaping Night. A massive, violent vortex of black magic violently erupts from Kuro's body and completely engulfs the battlefield. Fully comprehending the terrifying depth of his awakened abilities, Kuro stands at the epicenter while his bewildered allies wonder what is happening. Overwhelmed by the surging energy, Kuro reaches his armored hand forward with a wild, unhinged expression. Without an ounce of hesitation, the Dark Swordsman fully unleashes his devastating Dark Escaping Night technique. A colossal sphere of absolute blackness rapidly expands across the cavern, ruthlessly consuming the Guardian's flames and blotting out the light. The dying monster laughs maniacally at Kuro's ridiculous new strength, gleefully cursing the human to suffer an untimely death before ever obtaining another colored attribute. Silencing the monster's arrogant laughter, the immense gravitational force of the shadows violently crushes the Guardian into dust. The dust settles across the ruined Colosseum, revealing the bald warrior standing firmly with his massive halberd. Looking out over the destroyed battlefield, the veteran warrior softly declares to his fallen comrades that the grueling fight is finally over. Highly relieved by their sudden victory, Shiro sprints toward Kuro and cheerfully asks if he is all right. Her hopeful smile quickly fades into sheer terror as she notices Kuro's rising mental contamination and the sinister aura still clinging to his body. Standing motionless before the ancient stone temple, Kuro's mind continues to aggressively fracture under the weight of the dark magic. Watching solemnly from the distance, the ghostly illusion of the white-haired girl laments that Kuro completely ignored her dire warning. A grim realization settles over the cavern, proving that colored attributes are not mere miracles but dangerous curses if used incorrectly. Even after obliterating the Guardian's final attack, Kuro's mental state rapidly deteriorates as the black magic actively threatens to bring him to utter ruin. Shiro and the bald warrior watch in absolute horror as a chaotic storm of corrupted data and shadows violently surrounds their partner. Desperately screaming his name over the roaring vortex, Shiro reminds Kuro that the battle is already over and the enemy is defeated. Groaning in sheer agony, Kuro completely ignores their desperate pleas as his mind slips further into the abyss. Lost within his own decaying consciousness, Kuro becomes highly confused by a swarm of mysterious, static voices calling out to him. Several featureless, ghostly white entities violently manifest from the swirling darkness, leaving Kuro to wonder if they are allies or enemies. The bald warrior violently pushes Shiro out of the way, screaming that these aggressive apparitions are absolutely not their friends. Moving with desperate speed, the warrior barely manages to intercept a lethal strike aimed directly at the terrified guide. The rogue dark energy violently sizzles and sparks upon impact, demonstrating its lethal instability. The horrified warrior realizes that Kuro's wildly out-of-control magic is actively absorbing his halberd, leaving them completely defenseless if they move carelessly. Sweating profusely, the veteran warrior recalls an ominous passage from the Holy Scriptures predicting that the Black Saint will eventually lose himself. Staring blankly at the chaotic vortex, Shiro softly repeats the terrifying prophecy in sheer disbelief. The bald warrior furiously curses himself for keeping quiet about the well-known dangers of the black attribute simply because he did not fully understand it. Gripping his dissolving weapon tightly, the veteran grimly realizes they might be forced to fight their corrupted friend if Kuro has truly lost his mind. Completely ignoring the warrior's frantic warnings to stay back, Shiro steps purposefully toward the chaotic storm consuming their ally. Armed with unwavering faith in her partner, Shiro confidently declares that Kuro is just a little lost and she is exactly the person needed to bring him back. A deeply determined Shiro bravely steps forward, resolving to act as Kuro's guiding light in this world. Taiga watches in stunned silence as the young girl prepares to do the unthinkable. Recalling a crucial manuscript detail that Kuro must be reminded of his precious bonds to regain his sanity, Shiro firmly declares she is going in. Without a second thought, she recklessly charges directly into the chaotic, swirling storm of deadly black mist to reach him. Intensely searing dark magic immediately scorches her skin, forcing her to carefully dodge the violent currents so Kuro will not blame himself for hurting her. Gritting her teeth against the agonizing pain, the young guide courageously pushes deeper into the suffocating tempest of dark energy. Reaching her hand into the swirling void, she is shocked to realize the chaotic darkness is no longer trying to absorb her. This critical observation confirms her desperate hope that a sliver of Kuro's consciousness is still fighting for control. She finally spots Kuro kneeling in the shadows, his body entirely corrupted by the ominous, jagged armor of his dark magic. A terrifying, hollow gaze pierces through the darkness, causing Shiro to freeze in momentary horror at his monstrous transformation. Overcoming her fear, she gently kneels beside the corrupted boy and desperately pleads with him to recognize her voice. Staring into his hollow eyes, she begs him to hold onto his fading awareness and remember who he truly is. In response, a terrifying, explosive aura of pitch-black flames violently erupts from Kuro's body as his mind wages a fierce internal war. Deep within his fractured consciousness, Kuro finds himself trapped in a silent digital void, facing a manipulative illusion of his sister Tawa. The sinister entity wearing Tawa's face softly mocks his reckless use of power, claiming she deliberately tried to stop him from destroying himself. Flashing a deceptive smirk, the illusion taunts that getting eternally trapped in this dark void will completely ruin his quest to find his real sister. Suddenly, Shiro's desperate shouts miraculously pierce through the mental contamination, startling both Kuro and the lingering phantom. As Shiro loudly reminds him that Taiga and Kura are completely safe, Kuro's clouded mind faintly recalls the faces of his new comrades. Grounding him further into reality, Shiro fiercely yells that Ikona's special cooking will get cold if he does not snap out of it immediately. Hearing the young girl's name violently jolts Kuro's heart, sparking a crucial flicker of humanity within his dark descent. The oppressive void begins to heavily fracture as Shiro passionately reminds him that he came to this new world specifically to find Tawa. Clutching his chest as his memories flood back, Kuro firmly reaffirms his ultimate, unwavering goal to reunite with his precious sister. Watching his resolve solidify, the fading illusion calmly observes how desperately Shiro is fighting to pull him back from the abyss. The dark mental prison violently shatters like glass as Shiro screams that his second chance at life has only just begun. Recognizing the warm, familiar voice calling out to him, Kuro's true consciousness forcefully claws its way back to the surface. Refusing to abandon him to the darkness, Shiro passionately swears she will bring him back no matter how deeply he is trapped. Kuro reflects on his meddlesome but incredibly kind-hearted guide, realizing she is exactly the anchor he needs to survive. Shiro's voice booms through the shattering remnants of his despair, promising to repeat her words as many times as it takes. With unwavering conviction, she fiercely insists that he is absolutely allowed to find happiness in this new life. Completely breaking free from the corruption, Kuro desperately shouts her name as the blinding light of reality floods his vision. Regaining his physical senses, a bewildered Kuro watches the suffocating black mist rapidly dissolve into the cavern air. Taiga frantically rushes into the clearing, desperately searching the dissipating smoke for his missing friend. Kneeling amidst the ruins with Shiro safely in his arms, a battered Kuro playfully trades insults with his teary-eyed savior. With the terrifying ordeal finally over, the narrative promises a grand seafood banquet awaits their triumphant return. The gentle narration notes that a warm, welcoming home is patiently waiting for the victorious boy. 2 weeks after conquering the deadly green dungeon, a peaceful morning arrives as Ikona cheerfully announces a visitor. Dressed in comfortable casual clothes, the celebrated hero slowly descends the wooden stairs of the bustling local pub. Kuro blinks in pleasant surprise as a fully healed Taiga warmly greets him from across the room, allowing the boy to enjoy a brief respite. Smiling softly at his boisterous friend, Kuro finally allows himself to enjoy a well-deserved moment of absolute peace over drinks. To celebrate their miraculous survival, a massive, brilliantly glistening grilled fish is proudly presented to the table as the ultimate feast. A cheerful waitress hums happily while bringing a seafood dish, noting that Kuro specially requested it. Sitting in the pub, Kuro tells the bald warrior that he took his injured comrade to a magic healer and will support her until she fully recovers. Standing solemnly in a graveyard, the bald warrior sincerely thanks Kuro for allowing them to properly bury their fallen comrades. Kuro gazes ahead with a quiet, heavy expression as he processes the veteran's gratitude. Assuring the concerned warrior that his mental contamination is safely low, Kuro promises he will be fine as long as he does not overuse his dark magic. Haunted by visions of his traumatic battle, Kuro vows to never let a disaster happen again where Shiro is forced to rescue him. The bald warrior warmly recites an ancient scripture stating that the legendary black sage needs both loved ones and comrades to fight alongside him. Resting his chin on his hand, Kuro nonchalantly wonders to himself which of those two categories Shiro actually fits into. Before the veteran can react to a sudden surprise, Kuro casually interrupts to discuss what they should do with their hard-earned loot. Placing a crystal pendant on the table, Kuro offers up the defeated guardian's magic tool since he has absolutely no desire to equip it himself. Kuro suggests selling the powerful artifact to pay for Clara's medical fees, completely ignoring the proud warrior's initial refusal to accept charity. Clenching his fist with fierce determination, the veteran insists he must fulfill his duty to his fallen comrades and Clara without relying on anyone else. Kuro simply smiles and accepts the proud warrior's unwavering resolve. As they prepare to part ways, the veteran sincerely thanks Kuro for being such a massive help during their deadly trial. Flashing a genuine smile, Kuro calls the veteran a true comrade and promises they will share a drink together again soon. Watching the grizzled warrior walk away into the distance, Kuro feels deeply relieved that the man is finally able to move forward. Kuro praises the veteran's incredible resilience, completely confident that Clara will successfully recover with his dedicated support. Shiro smiles warmly in silence, deeply moved by Kuro's genuine kindness toward his new friends. The serene moment passes when Shiro excitedly shoves a box into Kuro's hands and urges him to try on the ceremonial clothing inside. Dressed in a striking, aristocratic uniform, Kuro feels like a true fantasy protagonist while his friends loudly marvel at how perfectly it suits him. Shiro happily announces that his agonizing wait is finally over because the legendary Red Hero will be attending the upcoming ceremony. Kuro silently reflects that all his grueling efforts in clearing dungeons and hoarding magic tools were solely to secure a meeting with this specific hero. Gazing up at the bright sky, Kuro hardens his resolve for the long-awaited confrontation. Later that day, luxurious horse-drawn carriages arrive at a sprawling, heavily guarded mansion to kick off the grand event. Stepping into the extravagant, chandelier-lit ballroom, Kuro is completely stunned by the sheer, overwhelming scale of the high society gathering. A sharp-looking, bespectacled lieutenant named Puresu introduces herself and mentions she has heard incredible tales of his recent deeds. Bowing respectfully, the lieutenant declares it an exceedingly high honor to finally meet the rumored black hero in person. Overhearing the surrounding whispers, Kuro questions why the aristocrats are associating him with heroic tales and ancient scriptures. Shiro eagerly explains that his unprecedented black attribute makes him an undeniable hero, especially once the royal family grants him an official relic. A nearby noble eavesdrops in absolute shock as Kuro casually admits he has zero interest in officially becoming a hero despite his immense power. Adjusting her glasses, Lieutenant Puresu notes that heroic titles grant massive salaries and aristocratic privileges that make life incredibly easy. Kuro astutely points out that such luxurious privileges obviously come with the heavy duty of acting as the military's frontline fodder. Puresu points across the room to the exceptionally popular blue hero, a handsome aristocrat who commands unmatched ice magic. She then directs his attention to the divine healing hero, Erify, who boasts top-tier combat prowess and miraculous medical skills. The beautiful but highly eccentric healing hero aggressively flirts with a group of flustered girls, prompting Puresu to nervously admit her slight character flaws. Kuro awkwardly watches the bizarre display, deadpanning that these revered saviors are certainly a group of unique characters. Puresu proudly explains that despite their quirks, Deratora's 7 current heroes are veritable one-man armies who single-handedly slaughter enemy forces. Processing the existence of multiple colored heroes, Kuro begins to question Quinn's previous claim that only the 2 of them held such unique attributes. The grand ballroom suddenly falls dead silent as a booming voice formally announces the arrival of the legendary Red Hero. A sharp pair of boots steps forward, causing Kuro's eyes to widen in shock as he finally comes face to face with his ultimate target. A young woman with long hair steps forward, her face set in a serious, determined expression. Donning an elegant military uniform and cape, she strides confidently across the tiled floor of the grand hall. A woman excitedly waves her over for a drink, but Tawa politely declines while complaining about dealing with an annoying dungeon boss. Refusing Arifai's offer, Tawa cheerfully admits she prefers sweets over alcohol while a stunned Kuro watches her every move. Staring intently at the girl, Kuro silently observes that she has grown taller and her features have matured into an adult-like beauty. As ethereal feathers drift around her, he locks onto her familiar face with absolute certainty. His heart pounds in his chest as he confirms without a single doubt that this is the girl he has been searching for. Overwhelmed by a sudden rush of emotion, Kuro steps closer and softly breathes out Tawa's name. His eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the weight of the miraculous reunion finally crashes down upon him. However, the long-awaited reunion instantly shatters when Tawa turns around and coldly demands to know who he is. A brief flashback reveals the king officially appointing Kusuke as a hero and granting him the grand title of Kurono Kururus Nanaranchirado. Despite successfully becoming a recognized hero of the nation of Daratora that day, Kuro's mind remains completely clouded by confusion. Snapping back to the present, Kuro listens in horror as his unmistakable sister angrily rebukes him for casually using her first name. Glaring at him with utter unfamiliarity, Tawa sternly scolds his lack of manners and firmly states they have never met before. A deeply panicked Kuro frantically insists it is him, desperately begging to know why she is speaking to him like a stranger. Stepping between them, a shadowy silhouette sharply questions Kusuke's bizarre outburst while his heart hammers wildly against his ribs. Sweating profusely, the completely bewildered hero stammers in shock as he tries to process the impossible situation. Staring at the unmistakable face of his beloved sister, he agonizes over why she is looking at him with absolutely zero recognition. As Kuro desperately pleads for Tawa to wait, Arifai smoothly intervenes and orders a servant to fetch juice for the irritated girl. Watching the heartbroken boy closely, a knowing smirk slowly spreads across Arifai's face. When Kuro demands to know what she understands about the situation, Arifai proudly introduces herself as the divine healing hero and magic healer. She elaborates that her unique position specializes in tuning the mind, casually dropping the name Kochan to prove she knows his true identity. Arifai explains that her magic calms minds disturbed by cruel deaths, revealing that Tawa was one of her traumatized patients. Kuro desperately presses for more information about his sister's treatment, though Arifai teasingly notes she technically shouldn't reveal patient secrets. Dropping the playful act, the healer solemnly reveals that Tawa first arrived in this world exactly 5 years ago. A tragic memory surfaces, showing a frail, tear-soaked Tawa shivering alone amidst the crumbling ruins of her arrival. Arifai explains that upon being brought in, the young girl was trapped in an absolutely terrifying state of panic. The healer recounts how Tawa would violently thrash in her bed and scream out as if she were running from a horrifying monster. Continuing the grim diagnosis, Arifai reveals the girl cried endlessly all day long while desperately sobbing Kochan between her tears. Despite the overwhelming trauma, Tawa bravely persevered through her treatment until one day she finally calmed down enough to make a request. Tawa desperately begged to forget her past, but Arifai had to explain that human magic cannot actually erase memories. A shocked Kuro listens intently as Arifai reveals she instead placed a magical lock on his sister's mind. The healer details how the lock actively seals away specific agonizing memories, though she warns a sufficiently skilled mage could break it. Noting that the lock successfully returned Tawa to her originally stable self, Arifai warns that encountering familiar triggers could accidentally break the seal. Hearing this revelation, Kuro's mind violently snaps back to the fateful day on Earth when he selfishly chose to hang out at an arcade instead of accompanying her. A crushing wave of guilt consumes him as he realizes his negligence forced her to die, suffer as a hero, and ultimately beg to forget her own life. Trembling with sheer despair, Kusuke completely blames his own mistakes for every ounce of his sister's tragic suffering. The young Avenger's soul shatters as he mentally screams Tawa's name in pure, unadulterated agony. The perspective abruptly shifts to a grand, moonlit balcony where the kingdom's elite chat peacefully into the night. Snapping out of his dark thoughts, Kuro softly declines an offer for food and attempts to mask his devastating internal turmoil. Kuro internally reflects that Toei Reitsu is actually Tawa, realizing she intentionally sealed her own memories to forget her traumatic past on Earth. Pureisu addresses Kuro directly, telling the confused young man that he possesses the power of a true hero. Kuro firmly reiterates to the lieutenant that he has absolutely no interest in becoming a hero. Adjusting her glasses, Puresu notes that his lack of interest makes his heroic deeds highly unexpected since he still used his power to rescue trapped dungeon clearers and a young slave girl. She sharply questions why he is hesitating now when he previously threw his power around without a second thought to save others. Puresu calmly explains that while power cannot solve every problem, possessing it allows him to neutralize threats and protect the innocent. Standing under the moonlit sky, Puresu deeply thanks Kuro for talking with her and expresses sheer disbelief that someone so uninterested in glory would value innocent lives above all else. Kuro silently averts his gaze as Puresu confidently assures him that he has absolutely nothing to worry about. The elegant red hero stands quietly in the moonlit courtyard. Kuro formally bows and apologizes to Lady Shinsenton Pseudo Asa for his earlier rudeness. Tawa smiles gently and assures him she is not the type to hold grudges, noting that he seems to have genuinely reflected on his actions. Kuro thanks her, quietly thinking to himself that she truly never was one to hold on to a grudge. When Tawa asks for his name, she immediately recognizes Kusuk as a Japanese name and excitedly asks if he came from a world where Japan exists. Tawa marvels at the incredible coincidence that they share almost the exact same birthday and are both 18 years old. Kuro stares at her silently, completely overwhelmed by the undeniable proof that they share so many identical traits. Watching her smile and speak animatedly, Kuro is deeply moved by the sight of the real Tawa standing right in front of him. He warmly tells himself that simply seeing her happy and alive is more than enough for him. Their peaceful reunion is violently shattered by a sudden, loud crash echoing across the courtyard. A furious aristocrat violently scolds a terrified waiter for accidentally putting karam in his drink. The arrogant man loudly demands to know if this is an acceptable way to treat a revered hero. Tawa identifies the angry man as Raiku, the Red Dawn hero, assuring Kuro that the man is nothing like him. Raiku suddenly approaches Kuro and enthusiastically grabs his shoulders to welcome the rumored black hero to their country. Smirking arrogantly, Raiku asks if they were just gossiping about him and notes that Kuro first appeared in the forest temple. When Raiku asks if Kuro knows a white-haired guide named Shiro, he gleefully reveals that Shiro's mother used to be his own personal guide. Raiku chuckles dismissively, claiming he became so preoccupied with his heroic duties that he entirely alienated the hard-working mother-daughter duo. Kuro is completely taken aback by this connection, silently realizing that Shiro never mentioned a single word of this to him. Flashing a sinister grin, Raiku states that Shiro is absolutely right to keep quiet about their past. The arrogant hero suddenly drops a terrifying bombshell, proudly confessing that he is the one who murdered Shiro's mother. Kuro's eyes widen in absolute, paralyzed shock at the horrific revelation. The narration formally identifies the sinister man as Sudareku Sudaranskrupramaidisu, the Dawn hero. Glaring fiercely, Kuro coldly asks Raiku if he really killed her. Feigning innocence, Raiku strokes his chin and admits the event happened 7 years ago, playfully wondering if he should have phrased his confession better. Raiku arrogantly explains that as a one-man army entering his first dungeon, he never actually needed a guide in the first place. He recalls that Shiro's mother, Koko, was the specific guide assigned to him. Detailing her background as a reincarnated earthling, Raiku casually dismisses the helpful woman as an incredibly annoying burden. He bitterly complains that Koko always acted like a bossy senior, constantly ruining his fun by forcing him to stop exploring after just a few floors. Flashing a manic, terrifying smirk, Raiku reveals he hatched a brilliant plan to completely get rid of her. A horrifying flashback shows Koko being brutally devoured by a massive, one-eyed dungeon monster. Covered in blood, Raiku maniacally laughs as he explains he deliberately used her as live bait to safely learn the magic tool holder's behavioral patterns. He bitterly recounts returning to the bar victorious, only to be met by a fussy, crying young Shiro who incessantly demanded her mother back. An arrogant hero named Kurupro smugly boasts about beating up ruffians, casually admitting he provoked a woman at a bar just to cause trouble. A dark, trembling aura violently erupts around Kuro as he listens to the man's infuriating confession. Noticing the intense glare, Kurupro mockingly flashes a wicked grin and asks if he somehow hurt the young boy's feelings. The arrogant hero loudly demands silence from the crowd, while panicked bystanders desperately try to calm Kuro down before the celebration is ruined. Radiating sheer lethal intent, Kuro coldly asks Kurupro to confirm if he was truly the one who injured Shiro. Kurupro laughs off the accusation and cruelly describes Shiro's bleeding, fallen figure as an amusing sight. Drawing his blade under the glow of the moon, Kuro silently accepts the arrogant man's unapologetic confession. Stepping forward with absolute resolve, Kuro fiercely declares that he will gladly give the man the fight he so desperately wants. The anxious crowd watches the despicable provocation unfold, incorrectly assuming the conflict is merely a scheduled exhibition match. Arifai quietly explains to the onlookers that unlike other heroes who just use colors as titles, Kuro possesses a genuine colored magical attribute. The crowd eagerly anticipates seeing if Kuro's power is the real deal, while Kurupuro Maidisu arrogantly goads the boy into making the first move. Unleashing his immense power, Kurupuro Maidisu forcefully casts a blinding, wide-area magical attack known as the Light of Dawn. Kuro remains completely unfazed, channeling his own dark energy and declaring that his black magic also consumes absolutely everything. With a devastating swing, Kuro violently unleashes his shadowy Dark Eater technique to counter the blinding light. Kurupuro Maidisu flashes a cocky grin, seemingly recognizing the terrifying nature of the fabled black attribute. Massive chunks of debris violently scatter across the battlefield as the crowd realizes the hero's defensive barrier is incredibly tough. Kuro lands amidst a massive, smoking fissure that completely tears through the elegant tiled floor of the courtyard. Wiping sweat from his brow, Kuro grimly acknowledges the sheer, destructive power wielded by a recognized national hero. Seizing the opening, Kurupuro Maidisu aggressively lunges forward and delivers a brutal, high-speed downward slash. Kuro firmly blocks the heavy strike with his own blade, causing the metal to loudly creak under the intense pressure. Locking blades, Kurupuro Maidisu smugly boasts that Kuro is already beaten due to their massive level difference. Refusing to yield an inch, Kuro fiercely pushes back and firmly declares that the arrogant hero will not win today. Watching the intense clash, the crowd correctly notes that raw levels alone do not definitively decide the outcome of a battle. Kurupuro Maidisu realizes his young opponent is surprisingly strong, while Kuro coldly analyzes the man's combat limitations. A sudden, explosive burst of magical flames violently ignites directly on Kurupuro Maidisu's back. Utterly panicked by the sudden heat, the arrogant hero desperately flaps his cape to extinguish the roaring fire. Before he can recover, thick magical roots violently burst from the floor and tightly ensnare the confused man's limbs. Kuro fiercely rebukes the man for calling himself a hero, ordering him to actually use his head during a real fight. As Kurupuro Maidisu struggles to comprehend the coordinated assault, Kuro coldly mentions he doesn't know which arm struck Shiro. Moving with blinding speed, Kuro ruthlessly severs Kurupuro Maidisu's arm in a single, devastating strike. Blood violently sprays into the night air as the severed limb flies and the defeated hero screams in absolute agony. The stunned audience realizes Kuro's black attribute is actually a terrifying power of absorption that consumes absolutely everything. A spectator notes in sheer awe that Kuro is flawlessly utilizing the absorbed abilities to cast various high-level magic. Watching the brutal display of power, Tawa stares intensely at the dark hero with a glimmer of familiar recognition. The crowd stands completely paralyzed by fear and awe, realizing they are witnessing the overwhelming might of the true black hero. Sweating nervously as he notices the terrified onlookers, Kuro briefly wonders if his brutal retaliation was slightly overdone. Sheathing his weapon, Kuro calmly declares the battle over and instructs the bystanders to quickly fetch a healer. Refusing to accept his humiliating defeat, a maddened Kurupuro Maidisu desperately channels a massive, crackling sphere of magical energy. The spectators gasp in absolute horror as they recognize the catastrophic spell being formed above them. Driven entirely by murderous rage, the disgraced hero prepares to unleash a strategic-grade magic capable of incinerating the entire town. Furious over the perceived mockery, Raikou aggressively screams for Kuro to go to hell and repent. The tense standoff is suddenly interrupted by a soft rustle and a quiet hum coming from the nearby grass. A mysterious young girl casually steps onto the scene, noting that the commotion is quite noisy. Kuro immediately recognizes the incoming threat as Parting of Dawn, a devastating strategic-grade magic. He grimly realizes that this terrifying technique possesses enough raw power to completely incinerate an entire town. Desperately weighing his limited options, Kuro wonders if unleashing his previous dark move could successfully swallow the incoming attack. He severely hesitates, terrified of what will happen to his own body and mind if he relies on that dangerous attack once more. Gleefully mocking his panicked hesitation, Raikou unleashes a crazed scream and demands Kuro die. Completely ignoring the deadly tension, the mysterious ringlet-haired girl cheerfully demands to be let in on the fun. She flashes a bright, innocent smile that starkly contrasts the destructive magical energy charging around them. Raikou and his companions stare in absolute shock, frantically questioning why Parafindi is here instead of on her assigned mission. Unleashing a sudden surge of energy, Parafindi curiously asks if the unknown swordsman holds the legendary black attribute. Moving with impossible swiftness, she gracefully lands with a soft thud directly behind the highly startled swordsman. Sweating profusely, Kuro marvels at her terrifying speed and realizes she closed the entire distance in a single heartbeat. Letting out an exasperated sigh, Parafindi prompts Kuro to nervously wonder if this bizarre girl is also a revered hero. She boldly insults Kuro's pitifully ordinary appearance, revealing she only rushed over because she heard exciting rumors about a new black hero. While Kuro tries to process her bizarre attitude, Parafindi flashes a sly smirk and decides his inner personality might just be fun enough to spare him. The tense atmosphere shatters again when a frustrated hero angrily orders Lady Marigawain to stop joking around. Calling Raikou a noisy nuisance, Parafindi coldly threatens to slaughter him unless he uses his vaunted speed to get lost immediately. Raikou glares back with wide eyes, sweating heavily under the sudden and suffocating weight of her intense killing intent. Flashing a wicked, predatory grin, the young girl promises to aim directly for his neck the very next time they cross paths. The sheer force of her terrifying energy causes a massive, destructive rupture to slice straight through the surrounding environment. Bystanders scream in absolute horror as the sheer shockwave causes the entire mansion hall to violently collapse into a pile of ruins. Both Kuro and Raikou stare in awe as Parafindi smugly asks if the black hero managed to comprehend the true nature of her magic. A terrified Raikou realizes her invisible wind blade could have easily slaughtered him, prompting her to proudly boast about her vastly superior speed. Smirking with absolute confidence, she formally introduces herself as the cut hero Parafindi and brutally mocks anyone who dares challenge her speed. The arrogant Raikou suddenly breaks into a panicked scream, furiously whining that Kuro completely stole his arm even though he is a national treasure. The red hero stares in absolute horror as his severed arm violently pixelates and completely dissolves into thin air. The serene white hero Quinn suddenly arrives on the chaotic battlefield and calmly raises her hand toward the screaming aristocrat. Quinn effortlessly activates her white rejection magic to completely erase his injuries from existence and restore his physical body. Flexing his newly restored hand, Raikou realizes in sheer disbelief that Quinn flawlessly dispelled the lingering dark magic. Ordering his subordinates to prepare the carriage, a furious Raikou turns his back and intensely vows to make Kuro pay for this humiliation. Kuro solemnly acknowledges Quinn's timely arrival, quietly warning her that a proud man like Raikou will never let this bitter grudge go. Staring at him with a soft and melancholic expression, Quinn notes that Kuro inevitably became a hero despite his constant protests. Averting his gaze from her piercing stare, an awkward Kuro humbly admits that the grand title simply fell into his lap. Flustered but deeply grateful, Quinn bows her head and formally thanks Kuro for bravely saving her life during their last encounter. The tender moment is completely obliterated when Parafindi excitedly screams for her older sister and violently tackles Quinn in a massive hug. Nuzzling affectionately against the flustered Quinn, Parafindi cheerfully complains that she would have rushed over infinitely faster if she knew her sister was here. Kuro watches the bizarre, affectionate display in pure shock, highly confused by how rapidly the terrifying assassin shifted into a loving little sister. A wildly enthusiastic Arifai suddenly tackles Kuro in a suffocating hug, loudly praising his excellent battle performance while he desperately gasps for air. Arifai playfully notes Kuro's surprisingly gentle side, having realized the dark hero fought the arrogant nobleman solely because the man injured Shiro. While a deeply annoyed Kuro stubbornly refuses to drink, a cheerful Arifai simply ignores his complaints and enthusiastically invites Tawa to party until sunrise. Watching the festive celebration unfold, Arifai silently resolves to monitor Kuro's activities while noting that the underlying conflict with the kingdom's other heroes is far from over. The grand hall erupts in a joyous, roaring cheer as the guild officially welcomes Kuro to the kingdom of Deratora with raised glasses. After finally concluding the exhausting inauguration formalities, the newly appointed hero departs the capital the following morning to head back home. Riding quietly in a horse-drawn carriage through the forest, Kuro reflects that fulfilling his initial goal has only spawned entirely new, highly complicated problems. Staring blankly out the carriage window, the young man deeply agonizes over the complex, heartbreaking situation regarding his amnesiac sister Tawa. He struggles to figure out how to interact with her simply as a stranger, knowing she intentionally chained away the agonizing memories of their shared past. Furthermore, he realizes that maintaining his new status as a hero means he will inevitably be forced to fight bloody battles at the nation's command. Pushing those heavy burdens aside, a much more immediate and pressing concern aggressively demands the young hero's full attention. Stepping out of the carriage, Kuro arrives at the overgrown, sunlit ruins of the ancient temple where his second life originally began. Gazing at a crumbled statue, he quietly acknowledges that this temple is where his journey started before a familiar, surprised voice suddenly calls out his name. Turning around, Kuro finds a bewildered Shiro staring back at him with wide eyes, genuinely surprised to see him return to the abandoned ruins. Noting that this temple serves as the exact spawn point for all reincarnated otherworlders, Kuro casually asks his guide if she visits the site often. Shifting her gaze defensively, Shiro explains she frequently checks the ruins for new arrivals before suspiciously asking why he is suddenly so curious. With a heavy heart, Kuro gently admits that the arrogant hero Raikou recently told him some disturbing details regarding Shiro's tragic past and her deceased mother. A somber expression washes over the young girl's face as she softly explains she never intended to hide her past, but it simply is not a pleasant topic to casually discuss. Stepping closer to his distressed friend, a deeply concerned Kuro gently interrupts to ask if Raikou had physically harmed her during their prior encounter. Staring intensely into her eyes, the former Avenger asks a chilling, highly personal question about her desire to murder the man who wronged her family. Leaning in closer, Kuro bluntly asks if she has ever harbored any dark, violent thoughts about taking bloody revenge for her mother's death. Shiro's breath hitches in absolute shock as the immense, terrifying weight of Kuro's grim question fully sinks into her mind. Completely taken aback by his chillingly calm demeanor, the young guide softly breathes out his name in utter disbelief. Stammering nervously, she struggles to process his inquiry, asking if he truly expects her to assassinate a highly powerful national hero like Raikou. Without a single ounce of hesitation, Kuro coldly confirms that he is asking exactly that. Sweating under his piercing, unyielding gaze, an incredibly anxious Shiro cautiously turns the question around and asks what he would do in her shoes. Drawing from his own bloody, murderous past, the dark hero firmly declares that he would undoubtedly slaughter the culprit without a second thought. He ruthlessly reasons that when someone steals a precious life from you, the only logical, acceptable response is absolute, violent retribution. Passionately projecting his own trauma, Kuro insists that survivors possess an inherent, undeniable right to execute wrongdoers regardless of what any laws dictate. Defusing the suffocating tension with an awkward laugh, Shiro practically dismisses the dark concept by pointing out she entirely lacks the power to defeat a hero. Refusing to let the excuse stand, Kuro fiercely counters that lack of strength is irrelevant, because a true Avenger will always find a way to grow stronger or exploit a weakness. A heavy, deeply uncomfortable silence descends upon the ruins as the battle-hardened killer intensely studies the innocent young girl's wavering expression. Recognizing his own terrifying intensity, Kuro gently softens his gaze while Shiro finally opens up about her incredibly kind-hearted mother. Staring up at the bright sky, Shiro reveals that she and her mother died in a tragic accident on Earth before reincarnating into this parallel world together. Despite her fragmented childhood memories, the young guide admits that one specific, defining moment from her previous life remains flawlessly etched into her mind. A heartbreaking flashback reveals her injured mother desperately shielding a tiny, terrified Shiro amidst the chaotic, flooded ruins of their fatal accident. Trembling with emotion, Shiro recounts the profound, selfless warmth of her mother's final embrace as the woman sacrificed herself to ensure her daughter's survival. Returning to the present, Shiro deeply praises her mother's incredible resilience in raising a child entirely alone in a bizarre, unforgiving parallel dimension. Vivid memories showcase the exhausted but smiling woman working frantically day and night just to provide a safe, proper upbringing for her beloved daughter. With absolute pride, Shiro declares that her mother possessed a boundless, unwavering kindness that she freely extended to absolutely everyone she met. The heartfelt memory perfectly culminates in a warm, gentle image of their hands tightly clasped together, symbolizing an unbreakable bond of love. Reflecting on the past, Shiro recalls that the number of people drawn to her mother rapidly increased simply because she was incredibly kind. Shiro explains that while many early guides quit the dangerous profession, her mother's steadfast resolve convinced her that the job was a perfect fit. Smiling warmly, Shiro proudly quotes her mother's firm belief that guiding others was a necessary job that someone simply had to do. Deeply inspired by her mother's noble dedication, Shiro proudly admits she decided to become a guide herself. Her expression darkening with anger, Shiro declares her absolute hatred for Raikou while acknowledging that only the corrupt hero knows the true events of that fatal dungeon run. Despite knowing her mother sacrificed herself to protect the arrogant hero, Shiro firmly states she has no intention of personally killing him. Flashing a bright, tearful smile, Shiro confidently declares she will completely forget about seeking bloody revenge. Meanwhile, a quiet and peaceful night settles over the large inn where the adventurers are currently staying. Exhausted from the chaotic day, Kuro lies silently on his bed staring up at the wooden ceiling. Reflecting on Shiro's incredible forgiveness, Kuro marvels at her complete lack of murderous intent despite harboring deep resentment and regret. He grimly acknowledges that unlike Shiro, he would have violently executed his enemies for taking a loved one because he could never forgive himself otherwise. Closing his eyes in quiet contemplation, Kuro admits he could never adopt such a pure and forgiving mindset. His dark thoughts are suddenly interrupted when the door slowly creaks open to reveal a highly nervous Ikona. Kuro politely thanks the timid girl as she brings in the private dinner he specially requested for the evening. Noticing her unusual hesitation, Kuro asks if she needs something, but Ikona frantically stammers a denial. Leaning in with a gentle smile, Kuro reminds the staring girl that they are close friends and she can ask him absolutely anything. Ikona looks up with wide, hopeful eyes and softly asks if he truly means it. Suddenly exploding with sparkling enthusiasm, Ikona eagerly demands to know every single detail about the grand hero ceremony. Completely taken aback by her sudden burst of energy, Kuro stares blankly at the highly excited young girl. Watching her bounce with excitement, Kuro warmly realizes that Tawa used to share the exact same childhood obsession with royalty and castles. As Kuro describes a ballroom 100 times larger than their pub, he feels a deep sense of relief seeing Ikona finally acting like a normal, happy child. He vividly recounts the luxurious woolen rugs, sparkling chandeliers, and the endless parade of flashy nobles arriving in grand carriages. Noticing her starry-eyed awe, Kuro playfully offers to describe the legendary heroes, internally smirking as she eagerly takes the bait. Ikona marvels at his dramatic description of the white hero Queen T, imagining her as a beautiful, mysterious phantom. After describing the handsome blue hero Rikusu, Ikona excitedly praises the noble knight before shyly admitting she thinks Kuro is just as handsome. Ikona shrieks in absolute terror as Kuro casually explains how the chaotic cut hero Parafindi violently sliced the entire meeting hall in half. Ikona's mind completely overloads from the incredible stories, leaving her dizzy and starstruck by the sheer awesomeness of the heroes. Kuro awkwardly sweats as he watches the poor girl completely short-circuit from his overwhelming tales. Suddenly remembering the eccentric healing hero, the scene shifts later to the bustling streets of the royal capital Jurudiesu. Kuro arrives at a quiet, ornate building officially marked as the clinic belonging to the divine healing hero Arifai. Reading a messy sign hanging on the closed door, Kuro sighs and realizes the eccentric healer is currently away. Staring at the door, Kuro grimly admits he urgently needs to consult her about the dangerously rising mental contamination caused by his black attribute. Accepting defeat, Kuro decides to go buy a souvenir for Ikona instead, only to freeze when he spots a highly familiar face in the crowd. Standing gracefully in the sunlit street, Tawa turns around and calls out his name in utter surprise. Kuro's eyes widen in sheer shock as he stares directly at the girl he has been desperately searching for. The two stand frozen amidst the bustling crowds of the sprawling, sunlit capital city. Meanwhile, another hero stares at a glowing magical communication tablet, annoyed that Arifai is completely ignoring her messages. Sighing in exasperation, the hero notes that it is absolutely impossible to wake Arifai once she falls into a deep slumber. Standing outside the locked clinic doors, Kuro and Tawa awkwardly wonder what they are supposed to do next. Kuro frantically connects the dots, realizing Tawa must regularly visit the clinic to maintain the magical seal on her repressed memories. Noting that it must be difficult to bear a colored attribute, Tawa cheerfully assures Kuro that the highly skilled Arifai can examine him thoroughly. Kuro awkwardly stammers an agreement as Tawa curiously recalls that he reincarnated into this world very recently. Taking the lead with a bright smile, Tawa enthusiastically decides to show him around the bustling town while they wait for the doctor. Caught completely off guard, Kuro sweats nervously as he internally realizes he actually arrived in this town long before she did. Completely oblivious to his internal panic, Tawa flashes a cheerful grin and promises to show him some highly interesting places to pass the time. Resigning himself to the bizarre situation, Kuro softly agrees as they descend into the bustling, crowded streets of the capital. Trailing slightly behind her, Kuro silently laments how a simple doctor's visit escalated into a parallel world town tour guided by his amnesiac little sister. Tawa happily calls out to her brother, completely unaware that Kuro is fiercely agonizing over his inability to simply turn her down or strike up a normal conversation. Overlooking the magnificent cityscape, Tawa proudly declares the grand vista as her absolute favorite viewing spot. Still deeply lost in his own conflicted thoughts, a distracted Kuro offers a weak, distant murmur of agreement. Pointing toward a towering monument, Tawa excitedly introduces the grand figure as the legendary statue of the Black Hero. Surveying the 7 legendary hero monuments, Tawa notes they were likely crafted from pure imagination since those historical figures lived ages ago. Staring at the statues, Kuro internally ponders the true difference between dark and black attributes while recalling the light hero's descendant from the recent ceremony. Breaking his concentration, Tawa bursts into cheerful laughter and playfully teases that the sculpted statue is far more handsome than the actual black hero. Watching her energetically leap across the plaza, Kuro fondly reflects that his lively little sister genuinely hasn't changed a bit. A warm smile breaks across his face as he realizes she remains just as wild and cheeky as ever despite losing her precious memories of Earth. A wave of profound, bittersweet nostalgia washes over the dark hero as he watches her bright, unburdened smile. For a brief, magical moment, Kuro feels as though he has truly traveled back to those peaceful, long-lost days of their childhood. Snapping out of his daze, Kuro urgently calls out her name and warns her not to wander too far ahead into the dense crowd. Desperate not to lose her in the bustling sea of people, Kuro swiftly reaches out and firmly grasps her gloved hand. Without a single second of hesitation, Tawa violently slaps his hand away with a terrified, visceral shout of rejection. The bustling world around them instantly freezes as a completely stunned Kuro stares blankly at his forcefully rejected hand. Snapping back to reality, a deeply flushed and sweating Tawa frantically apologizes for her harsh, instinctual reaction. Masking his deeply shattered heart, Kuro steps back and softly dismisses the incident by noting her known difficulty around men. Staring at her own trembling hand, Tawa genuinely wonders aloud why she finds it strangely easier to tolerate Kuro's presence than anyone else's. Breaking the suffocating, awkward silence, Tawa swiftly turns her back and forcefully urges him to keep moving. Glaring intensely at her retreating figure, an agonizing wave of guilt crashes into Kuro as he realizes her traumatic past still violently torments her. Observing her lingering psychological scars, the dark hero grimly deduces that the magical lock sealing her agonizing memories is far from perfect. Staring at his own dark gloves, he terrifyingly wonders if his mere touch threatens to accidentally shatter her fragile mental seal. Clenching his trembling fingers into a tight fist, the fierce avenger swallows the bitter reality of his own helplessness. Trapped between wanting to protect her and fearing he might break her, Kusuk desperately agonizes over what he is supposed to do next. The heavy atmosphere finally breaks as they return to the Grand Brick Clinic and hear a familiar voice apologizing for the long delay. Sitting comfortably behind her desk, a disheveled Arifai lazily adjusts her glasses and shamelessly admits she was sleeping the entire time. Leaning forward in her chair, the perceptive healer immediately notices Kuro's deeply troubled expression and asks what is bothering him. Kuro smoothly deflects the question by pointing out her different appearance, prompting Arifai to playfully tease him about which look he prefers. Dropping the playful act, Arifai adopts a dead-serious tone to officially begin their crucial discussion regarding his terrifying mental contamination. Kuro's eyes narrow as Arifai ominously reveals that ancient scriptures explicitly prophesy the black hero will inevitably lose his own mind. Staring directly into his soul, the healer firmly demands to know the exact circumstances of his mental break while referencing similar tragic legends. Recalling the suffocating darkness of the dungeon, Kuro explains the horrifying sensation of an unknown entity actively trying to hijack his physical body. Arifai delivers a chilling, absolute warning that recklessly overusing his dark magic will eventually allow that sinister presence to permanently usurp his flesh. Discussing the dangers of colored magic, A bespectacled woman explains that drawing excessive power rapidly worsens a user's symptoms. Glaring at the shadowy mass, Kuro realizes the terrifying entity that emerged after his dark escaping night was the physical manifestation of that excessive power. The woman solemnly warns Kuro that losing his precious memories is far worse than mental contamination, advising him to completely avoid overusing his magic since there is no cure. Explaining that focusing on precious things and true emotions is the only key to recovery, she listens as Kuro quietly asks if he even belongs here. With a heavy heart, Kuro solemnly questions if he even has the right to stand safely by Tawa's side. The woman calmly explains that forgotten injuries still leave deep scars in the soul, prompting a distressed Kuro to worry that his presence might force her painful memories to resurface. As Tawa sits quietly alone in a waiting room, the woman notes that her freshly sealed wounds still ache and the absolute best they can do is hide the remaining scars. Confirming his worst fears, the woman warns that interacting with her forgotten brother could easily break the memory lock, though her deep scars will permanently remain regardless of what he does. Pushing open the clinic door, she advises Kuro that there is only one important thing he actually needs to consider right now. Stepping out to face a highly startled Tawa, Kuro listens as the woman tells him he simply needs to decide if he truly wants to stay by her side. Breaking the tense silence, Tawa anxiously asks about his examination, and Kuro warmly assures her that everything went perfectly fine. Walking together outside, Kuro offers to treat her to a meal as thanks before quickly suggesting they should also invite Rikusu and Arifai. Meeting her gaze, Kuro smiles and earnestly states that he just wants to get better acquainted with everyone in their group. Acknowledging the lingering pain of her sealed memories, Kuro internally vows to fiercely protect Tawa and never leave her side when danger strikes. Staring ahead with unwavering resolve, he silently swears to protect his little sister throughout this chaotic second life. Kuro grimly accepts this heavy burden, fully resolving to protect her even if he can never be her true brother again. Later that night, a grand, heavily guarded mansion stands silently under the ominous night sky. Bathed in the pale moonlight, the quiet estate is suddenly disturbed by an intense, pulsating magical throb. Moving with blinding speed, an enraged Kuro dashes forward as the agonizing throbbing sensation aggressively intensifies. The arrogant Raikou falls backward with a pathetic scream of absolute terror as an unseen force violently strikes him. Jolting awake in a luxurious bed surrounded by naked women, a heavily panting Raikou is nervously asked if he is all right. Furious at the sudden interruption, the crazed hero viciously screams at the terrified women to shut up and immediately get out of his sight. Frantically wrapping themselves in loose bedsheets, the terrified women apologize profusely as they sprint out of the luxurious bedroom. Left completely alone in the dark, a sweating Raikou grits his teeth as he realizes his severed arm continues to ache relentlessly. Consumed by a twisted hero's obsession, Raikou glares murderously into the shadows and vehemently swears he will never forgive his attacker. Meanwhile, Shiro flashes a brilliant, carefree smile as she happily holds up a massive wooden drinking mug. Inside the bustling pub, an adventurer greets Taiga only to be informed that Kuro is currently out on an important mission. Flashing a proud smile, Shiro eagerly explains exactly why their dark-haired companion is currently busy. Deep inside a newly discovered dungeon, Kuro stands firmly alongside the white hero Quinn as they boldly face an encroaching demonic threat. The imposing stone structure is revealed to be Puradashu, a dangerous dark attribute villain lair located on the outskirts of the royal capital. A massive, relentless horde of skeletal monsters marches up the ancient stairs, perfectly setting the stage for the newly minted hero Kuro. The vicious demonic army aggressively breaks forth from the dark lair, utterly determined to slaughter their way to the surface. Leaping fearlessly into the chaotic fray, Kuro and the specialized heroes swiftly execute the skeletal monsters to complete their highly important mission. Moving with elegant precision, the blue hero Rikyusu dramatically commands his powerful ice magic to instantly freeze the advancing threats. Dancing gracefully across the frozen battlefield, the white hero Quinn effortlessly shatters the encased monsters into countless icy shards. Violently slashing through a massive beast, Kuro loudly commands his bespectacled companion to take out the next monstrous target. Sweating profusely as a terrifying, jagged-toothed monster lunges directly at her, Puresu nervously accepts the dangerous command. Taking a desperate breath to steady her trembling nerves, the bespectacled lieutenant urgently reminds herself to rely on her combat training. Unleashing a devastating, explosive strike, She violently obliterates the towering rock monster into a shower of crumbling debris. Panting heavily as the chaotic dust settles, she stares at her trembling hands and proudly realizes she successfully destroyed the beast. Exhausted and completely out of magic, Kuro suggests they stop for the day, prompting his companion to agree that they have reached the limit for this level. Deciding to call it a day, the group begins their departure as the rhythmic clatter of a carriage echoes around them. Riding inside the rattling carriage, a bespectacled young girl earnestly breaks the silence to thank Kuro for giving her such a valuable opportunity. Looking down in shame, she laments that the light hero's bloodline in her family has severely diluted over time, leaving her feeling too weak to fight alongside true heroes. Kuro warmly reassures the determined descendant that she is already growing stronger, advising her that achieving her noble goal to protect the citizens simply requires properly directed effort. Humbly dismissing his own actions as nothing special, Kuro turns to sincerely thank Queen for her exceptional strength and assistance during the day's trials. Gazing out the window, Kuro silently reflects that despite settling into a mundane daily routine, his ultimate goal of finding his sister has already been accomplished. The peaceful carriage ride is violently interrupted as the panicked driver suddenly hits the brakes, causing everyone inside to jolt forward in alarm. Standing arrogantly in the middle of the dirt road, a young girl with twin tails and a heavily frilled dress forcefully blocks the carriage's path. Peering out of the carriage, a deeply confused Queen instantly recognizes the flamboyant girl and wonders aloud why she would be out here. Glaring at the obstruction, Queen coldly suggests they simply run the girl over, forcing a sweating Kuro to immediately reject the ruthless idea. The twin-tailed girl dramatically points an accusing finger at Kuro, fiercely declaring him the man who has been stubbornly following her beloved older sister around. Boasting about her unbreakable bond of love with her sister, the girl furiously threatens Kuro and bitterly regrets not cutting him down during the hero ceremony. To Kuro's absolute bewilderment, the strange girl begins heavily panting and blushing as she takes extreme, masochistic delight in Queen's coldly disgusted glare. Watching the bizarre display, a highly disturbed Kuro asks Queen about their relationship, noting that the girl seems completely and utterly devoted to her. Queen nonchalantly explains that the girl's twisted obsession began when she ruthlessly turned the tables on her during an unprovoked attack long ago. Kuro stares back in stunned silence, finally understanding the deeply unhinged dynamic between the masochistic attacker and the cold-hearted Queen. Stepping out of the carriage with a confident smirk, Kuro reasons that simply proving he is stronger than the bizarre girl will permanently resolve the issue. Eagerly accepting the challenge, the girl flashes a wicked smirk and mockingly notes that Kuro seems to have an incredible amount of faith in his own skills. With a fierce glint in her eyes, she loudly declares they will use this battle to definitively decide who is truly suited to stand by her sister's side. Kuro tells an anxious Queen not to worry about a friendly mock battle, secretly resolving to use this fight to test his own limits despite the ban on inter-hero conflicts. Knowing his devastating Dark Eater technique causes severe mental contamination, Kuro realizes he must figure out how to win using only his base black attribute and absorbed abilities. Drawing his weapon with fierce determination, Kuro recognizes that fighting a recognized hero offers the perfect, unrestricted opportunity to freely test his growing skills. The girl swiftly takes a combat stance, signaling the immediate, explosive start to their high-stakes duel. Kuro violently lunges forward with incredible speed, delivering a devastating, high-powered slash that visibly shocks the bespectacled girl watching from the sidelines. A stunned spectator gasps his name in absolute shock as the immense power of his opening strike completely shatters the surrounding terrain. A massive, roaring explosion of pitch-black energy violently erupts from the impact point, instantly consuming the battlefield in terrifying shadows. Moving with blinding agility, the twin-tailed girl elegantly dodges the dark onslaught and forcefully launches a high-speed counterattack directly at Kuro. Having used a previously absorbed puppet ability to create a disposable dark clone, Kuro coldly analyzes her incredible swordplay and unique final cut skill from a safe distance. Exploiting the distraction, multiple shadowy clones of Kuro suddenly burst from the darkness to completely surround the highly confused girl from all sides. Recognizing the immense utility of his black magic, the girl gracefully spins into action and smugly declares that her final cut power is equally formidable. The girl unleashes a massive, swirling tornado of razor-sharp magical slashes, violently deflecting the coordinated assault from Kuro's dark clones. Blistering magical energy aggressively burns through the air as the sheer force of her sweeping attack completely overwhelms the shadowy duplicates. Flashing a fierce, competitive grin, she aggressively charges at the real Kuro and arrogantly asks if this meager display is all he can handle. Slashing through the dark remnants, she furiously demands that Kuro stop hiding and finally show her the true, terrifying power of the black attribute. Kuro intensely locks eyes with his charging opponent, firmly bracing his heavy blade against the incredibly fast, devastating strike hurtling toward his face. The narrative ominously reveals that the girl's signature final cut is a terrifying, absolute power capable of cleanly severing absolutely everything it touches. The devastating blade she released viciously tore through the battlefield, fully intending to permanently eradicate Kuro in a single, sweeping strike. However, her smug expression falters as the attack merely chops up another clone, failing to rip apart his real body like she originally intended. Emerging completely unharmed from the smoke, a smirking Kuro wields a brand new sword formed by absorbing her attack, proving he is a genuinely formidable opponent. A system explains that Deratora's king holds a miraculous power called Act of God, which was used to bestow Kuro with the unbreakable sacred sword Kakushi Muzu. Clashing against a fierce attack, Kuro notes that the unbreakable sword seems like the real deal and recalls rumors about divine blood running in the royal family. Realizing he must use whatever tools are available, Kuro acknowledges that the sacred sword can block attacks that his mid-grade dark magic cannot absorb. An excited Parafindi accepts his challenge, warning him to watch closely as she prepares to execute her final cut on both him and his dark power. Watching the intense standoff, a panicked Puresu warns Quinn that the situation is quickly turning ugly. Parafindi flashes a wide, manic smile as she notices that Kuro seems to be genuinely enjoying the thrill of the battle. Moving with blinding speed, the two combatants fiercely dash toward each other to initiate their deadly clash. Devastating, high-speed slashes violently tear through the surrounding forest with a loud whoosh. Explosive bangs echo across the terrain as the sheer force of their high-speed impacts obliterates the sturdy tree trunks. Skidding to a graceful halt, Parafindi cheerfully admits her surprise that Kuro could actually follow her at such an incredible speed. Recalling that she was much faster during the ceremony, Kuro forces himself to focus while Parafindi eagerly decides to give him 20 more points. Glaring intensely at his opponent, Kuro channels his dark magic and fully activates his black unification technique. Taunting him for playing hide-and-seek, Parafindi dashes forward and praises his speed since her eyes couldn't fully track his movements. Staring up at the rising debris, Parafindi laughs maniacally and praises the legendary black hero's expected prowess. Promising to give him a small reward, she violently unleashes a flurry of devastating slashes. She gracefully slides backward as massive, cleanly severed chunks of rock begin to slide apart. Sliding smoothly through the ruined terrain, Parafindi proudly announces her full name and promises to demonstrate an exceedingly elegant dance of blades. Kuro swiftly retaliates by activating his black funeral technique, utilizing the freshly severed boulders as his own massive projectiles. He relentlessly hurls the massive rocks toward her, noting that simply absorbing the debris would be a massive waste of his magic. Clashing with intense force, Kuro brings his sacred sword up to block her next devastating strike. The two warriors violently cross blades in a high-speed, intense mid-air clash. Smirking triumphantly, Parafindi reveals she was waiting for this exact moment to unleash a point-blank, full-power final cut to completely pulverize his black magic. With a deafening crash, the cut hero initiates her ultimate, devastating strike. A massive burst of raw energy violently explodes outward as Parafindi executes the attack directly against the armored swordsman. Parafindi suddenly screeches in absolute shock when a dark opening unexpectedly pierces straight through her ultimate attack. Staring in sheer, paralyzed horror, she watches as her supposedly unbeatable technique is completely shattered by the dark magic. Standing tall amidst the lingering dust, Kuro calmly asks the stunned cut hero if she can continue the fight. Staring blankly at the ground in sheer disbelief, a deeply shocked Parafindi softly admits her undeniable defeat. Sinking to her knees, she praises him as a true hero while a highly relieved Puresu rushes over to ensure nobody is seriously hurt. Muttering under her breath, Parafindi furiously deduces that Kuro intentionally let her destroy his sacred sword so his black magic could simultaneously absorb her final cut. Watching the frustrated girl grumble to herself on the dirt, Kuro awkwardly sweats and suggests to Puresu that they should just leave her alone. The peaceful aftermath is abruptly interrupted when Kuro suddenly receives a frantic system message from Ikona. The terrifying text message begs for immediate help, revealing that Shiro and Taiga are in grave danger. Kuro's eyes widen in absolute, paralyzed terror as he desperately tries to comprehend the horrifying news. The scene abruptly shifts to a burning, blood-stained battlefield where a brutally defeated adventurer lies motionless in the snow. Staring at the horrific massacre, a horrified Kuro frantically asks why someone would commit such a gruesome act. Dashing frantically toward the bleeding veteran warrior, Ikona and Kuro scream his name in utter panic. Bleeding profusely on the snowy ground, Taiga weakly reveals that their attacker was wearing the official clothes of a hero. Gripping the ground in despair, the dying warrior forces out the agonizing revelation that the rogue hero took Shiro away. Staring down with wide, trembling eyes, the young white-haired girl realizes that the impertinent hero has significantly changed. Observing the bound woman, a voice notes how much the impertinent brat has changed. They remark that despite not seeing her for a while, she has already developed the body of a woman. Smiling menacingly, the man orders his captive to quickly use her glass. He demands she call for that hero of hers. He mockingly adds that there is no guarantee her savior will even reach this place in one piece. Glaring with intense malice, he taunts Kuro, eagerly wondering what the hero will do next. Breaking the tension briefly, an aside note laments that this is what they look like when struggling with not enough help. Meanwhile, amidst the smoldering ruins of a destroyed building, someone asks if Taiga has calmed down. Taiga tiredly reassures them that he is okay. Arriving at the devastating scene, a serious-looking Kuro pleads to know exactly what happened here. A battle-scarred man furiously explains that the destruction took only a single moment. He bitterly blames it all on that bastard's doing. He reveals the culprit's identity as none other than the Dawn hero, Raikou. Continuing the grim report, he states that absolutely everyone got done in by this rogue hero. Recalling the chaos, the survivor explains how they rushed out to join the fight after hearing a commotion outside. Despite common raiders banding together to fight, they were absolutely no match for Raikou's terrifying strength. After breaking into the building, Raikou immediately pointed his sword at Ikona. He cruelly announced that he would kill people one by one until Shiro was presented to him. Though the defenders found this unacceptable and prepared to fight, Shiro bravely stepped out and surrendered herself to protect everyone. The frustrated survivor recalls how they could only watch quietly as the bastard took Shiro away. Before leaving, Raikou declared she would be the bait to lure Kuro out. Piecing it together, a shocked Kuro realizes his enemy has been holding a grudge all this time. He understands Raikou is specifically using Shiro just to lure him out. Trembling with trauma, Ikona cries out that Raikou is the exact same man who destroyed her hometown, Jibarunia. Ikona remembers seeing his face clearly right before she was captured and carried away. She adds that when he pointed his sword at her, he spoke very distinct words. Flashing a wicked grin, the memory shows Raikou mockingly recognizing her as the brat from Jibarunia. As Ikona wails about losing all the people in her shop and village, Kuro seethes with anger. He realizes with horror that this poor girl has had her home destroyed twice by the same man. Interrupting the sorrow, a guard brings a status report confirming there are fortunately no fatalities. They mention they are currently healing everyone, starting with the most wounded. Offering a miraculous solution, a white-haired woman suggests using her power of denial to fix everything. She promises to make the entire disaster as if it never happened. Raising a hand to stop her, Kuro appreciates the thought but insists she conserve her limited mana. He tells her they will absolutely need that power to rescue Shiro later. The heavy crunch of wheels announces the sudden arrival of reinforcements. A new figure approaches the group, apologizing for the delay. Tapping her glasses professionally, a newly arrived woman steps up to help. She immediately requests the injured be sent to her for examination. Recognizing his allies Arifai and Rukius, Kuro watches as Rukius bows deeply in shame. The man sincerely apologizes to Kuro for this terrible turn of events. A momentary pause settles over the chaotic scene as the gravity of the situation sinks in. Blaming his own naivety for the disaster despite stationing guards, Rukius vows that Raikou must be stopped. He implores Kuro to let his team help spare no effort moving forward. Questioning how such a bastard became a hero, Kuro demands to know Raikou's deal. Rukius explains that despite going overboard, Raikou's devastating heat and light magic is simply too useful to the state's war efforts. Rukius reveals that a tragic incident 6 years ago caused a massive hero shortage. To quell public fear during the raging war, the state even gave fake-colored titles to normal magicians just to keep up appearances. Kuro bluntly summarizes that Raikou gets a pass for being a troublemaker solely because his fighting skills are in demand. Hanging his head, Rukius admits to their great shame that this is correct. Stealing his resolve, Rukius asserts that Raikou has finally crossed the line by injuring guards and attacking this place. He assures Kuro that the rogue hero's severe actions will no longer be disregarded. Suddenly, a magical communication device pings with an incoming transmission. Thanks to this world's glass network, news of the incident has already reached the royal capital, tracking Raikou's movements. Listening to the magical transmission, Rukius's expression darkens considerably. He turns back to Kuro and warns him of a very troublesome development. Staring grimly ahead, Rukius confirms that Raikou's magical signature has been officially detected. He prepares to reveal the exact location where the rogue hero is hiding. An ominous title card reveals the destination as an ultra-high difficulty area reserved exclusively for heroes. Standing within the treacherous ultimate labyrinth Arrogates, Raikou admires the great view. He sadistically asks his captive Shiro if she agrees with him. Panning over the massive, ruined architecture, they notes the extreme danger of this specific dungeon. The labyrinth is so notoriously difficult that only official heroes are legally permitted to enter. Shadows shift in the dark ruins, confirming the labyrinth's lethal reputation. Terrifying Guardian-class monsters roam freely around every single corner. Ignoring the lurking threats, Raikou turns his head with a sinister look as Shiro desperately questions why he is doing this. A menacing voice warns the fallen hero that once the incident becomes public, he will be stripped of his status and scorned as a criminal with no place left in the world. Unfazed by the dire warning, the arrogant man smirks and confidently declares that such a fate is not going to happen. He boasts that his special body and magic were given to him by God, claiming that empires like Akusabayana would welcome his gifts with open arms. Reveling in his own arrogance, he insists that as long as he possesses a hero's power, he will always be free to use his gifts however he pleases. A desperate female voice suddenly breaks through, begging him to stop this madness. She reminds him that her mother only helped him because she didn't want him to ruin his entire life by turning out like this. Tears streaming down her face, the chained girl screams at him not to use his second chance at life to hurt innocent people. The man simply sneers back, selfishly proclaiming that this second life is exclusively his own chance for happiness. Moving with cruel speed, he suddenly reaches out and violently grabs the defenseless girl. As she winces in pain from his groping, he self-righteously declares himself to be justice, sneering that he only used her mother to survive and finding the girl just as irritating. Driven by absolute malice, he threatens to immolate all annoying evildoers and promises to brutally kill Kuro next. The girl despairs as she realizes her words will never reach a man who has lost all reason, mentally pleading for Kuro to stay away. Meanwhile, a frantic holographic message from Shiro materializes, begging the recipient not to come to their location. Kuro reads the screen with wide eyes, shouting Shiro's name in shock as the device clatters against the surroundings. The narrative shifts to the ominous depths of Chapter 23, plunging into an ultra-difficulty evil territory. Unlike regular dungeons, this forbidding realm denies entry to normal conquerors, requiring a specific representative chosen from among the heroes. With the Hero of Dawn secretly in charge, 3 determined figures approach a glowing ruin completely unaware of the true peril waiting inside. Kuro, Lucius, and Elfie stand resolute before the towering, desolate ruins. The dark and formidable labyrinth of Eliga's Nyx looms ahead, promising unseen dangers. Surveying the area, the group realizes this dungeon, originally under Raikou's charge, is entirely different from the situation described in their reports. Acknowledging their complete lack of intel, Lucius advises the team to proceed with extreme caution. Taking point, Kuro glances back and asks Vigna to diligently cover the team's rear. Vigna eagerly accepts the task while Kuro turns to Ikona, asking her to take good care of Shiro once they find her. Ikona insists her only concern is Shiro's safety, prompting a guilt-ridden Kuro to apologize for putting her through such a painful ordeal again. Flashing back to a ruined home, Kuro firmly promises Ikona that he will definitely bring Shiro back and never let that man hurt them again. Burning with fierce resolve, he vows to fiercely protect everything and not let the enemy take a single thing from him. Unleashing his fury, Kuro instantly materializes a devastating dark attack known as the Black Devourer. The massive wave of dark energy violently erupts from the ground, instantly shredding the approaching monstrous horde. A grotesque, skeletal dragon monster roars in agony as the terrifying black magic consumes its twisted form. Eyes narrowed in lethal concentration, Kuro aggressively drives his dark blade forward to maintain the relentless assault. A pack of decaying zombies blindly charges through the gloom, only to be effortlessly bisected by Kuro's lightning-fast slashes. The undead creatures are blown apart into bloody fragments as the flurry of dark blades relentlessly tears through their rotting flesh. Elfie gracefully commands the chaotic battlefield, stepping over the decimated monsters with an aura of supreme magical authority. Smiling at his comrades' display of power, Lucius readies his own magic and playfully notes that he can't afford to fall behind such exceptional color attribute wielders. He seamlessly twirls his ornate spear, channeling a blinding surge of holy light into the tip of the elegant weapon. The dazzling spear unleashes a massive cross-shaped explosion of pure light that instantly engulfs the remaining undead attackers. Caught in the brilliant shockwave, the zombie horde is completely vaporized into harmless crystalline shards. Satisfied with the effortless extermination, Lucius flashes a confident smile and urges the team to hurry onward now that the area is cleared. Relying on Lucius's dependable strength, the trio rushes deeper into the dungeon at top speed, absolutely determined to reach Shiro in time. Their rapid advance comes to a sudden, shocking halt as a colossal guardian abruptly materializes to block their path. Kuro observes the environment, wondering if there are tons of monsters crawling around like the magic tool wielder from the first dungeon he dove into after reincarnating. He stares down two terrifying new threats, a shadowy beast with a gaping maw and a jagged, crystalline monster. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light and a massive explosion erupt in the distance. Kuro leaps nimbly through the air, narrowly dodging a deadly barrage of massive crystalline spikes erupting from the ground. The devastating wave of sharp, jagged ice completely obliterates the surrounding ruins. Hearing a voice confirm they are fine over there, a surprised Kuro turns to see his allies rushing into the fray. He quickly notes that the magical energy is completely different, boasting attributes other than fire, but insists they do not have time to deal with these monsters right now. A sudden voice asks if they want some help, pointing out that they are in a hurry to move forward. Kuro turns in shock and yells her name as Tawa dramatically arrives on the battlefield with her sword drawn. Kuro wonders if Lucius called for her, while another ally praises Tawa for making it so fast and right on time. Tawa acknowledges this is a super difficult dungeon exclusive to heroes, prompting Kuro to ask why she is here before she confidently declares she is ready to fight. Realizing he might be misunderstanding something about Tawa, Kuro hesitates as he watches her leap into action. Tawa leaps gracefully from the ruined architecture, her cape billowing dramatically behind her as she descends. Tawa shouts for Lucius to help her handle half of the enemies, to which he smirks and complies with her command. Watching her fierce display, Kuro realizes that the one standing before him now is definitely not the fragile little sister he needs to protect. He proudly acknowledges Tawa as the divine beast of blazing red wings, fighting perfectly alongside Lucius, the divine beast of resolute blue wings. A massive burst of magical energy erupts across the ruins as they loudly manifest their true powers. A terrifying, blazing avian entity composed of dark flames violently bursts forth into the battlefield. In stark contrast, a magnificent, crystalline horse creature materializes from the icy debris. The colossal ice beast charges forward, violently clashing against the shadowy fire monster while Tawa leaps into the sky above them. Kuro watches in awe, fully comprehending that Tawa has been fiercely fighting as a hero all this time in this world. Realizing there is absolutely no need to worry about her, Kuro focuses on what he truly needs to do right now. Kuro sprints ahead with renewed determination, shouting back for Tawa and Lucius to take care of the rest. Watching Kuro leave, Lucius notes that they have been entrusted with this fight, which clearly means Kuro acknowledges their true strength. Facing down a seemingly endless horde of terrifying monsters, they declare that this is where the real fight finally begins. Gripping her weapon tightly, Tawa asks Lucius if he is ready, to which he fiercely confirms that he absolutely is. The ruined cityscape trembles as the devastating clash between the heroes and the monster horde escalates. Deep within the ruins, a menacing Raikou comments on Kuro finally making it, noting that some uninvited heroes have slipped in as well. Flashing a wicked grin, Raikou laughs at Kuro for not having the courage to fight alone, boasting that even an army of 10,000 is meaningless the moment they arrived here. Raikou declares with absolute certainty that this labyrinth will be Kuro's end. Meanwhile, Kuro's companion points out a location, wondering just how vast this endless, monster-filled dungeon truly is. Staring up at a massive, crooked tower, they sense a magical signature practically showing off and realize Raikou is waiting for them there. Knowing Lucius and Tawa are doing their best to hold the line, Kuro solidifies his resolve to defeat Raikou and rescue Shiro himself. Rushing forward, Kuro and White suddenly pull up short as they are confronted by a massive, unexpected dead end. White screams for Kuro to dodge, confused because there was definitely a clear path right there just a moment ago. The solid stone wall violently erupts forward, attempting to crush the two heroes beneath massive boulders. Kuro leaps back as the shifting ruins completely reconstruct themselves, forming into a colossal, terrifying stone golem. Staring up at the towering monstrosity, a shocked Kuro realizes the very buildings themselves are transforming. The immense scale of the threat becomes clear as entire city blocks physically rip themselves from the earth to attack. White looks on in absolute horror, realizing that the entire ruined city is actually one gigantic, living monster. A colossal threat suddenly emerges, its massive stone form shattering the surrounding terrain with overwhelming force. Glowing eyes pierce through the chaotic dust as the unstoppable entity locks onto its next targets. Mountains of heavy debris violently crash down, forcing the heroes into a desperate defensive maneuver. Observing the relentless assault, Elfie grimaces at the sheer size and number of their foes, deeply annoyed that every destroyed enemy is instantly covered by another. A sudden, desperate warning rings out to be careful as another devastating attack hurtles toward them. Massive stone pillars violently crash into the ground, completely obliterating the battlefield around the evading heroes. Kuro violently grits his teeth as he dodges, cursing his frustration at getting held up in a treacherous place like this. The towering stone giant pulls back its heavily armored fist, preparing to deliver a crushing blow to the trapped fighters. Suddenly, Kuro and Elfie freeze in their tracks as an unexpected presence completely interrupts the chaos of the battlefield. A girl in an elegant, frilly dress gracefully descends from the sky, contrasting wildly with the violent destruction below. Staring in utter disbelief at the newcomer, Elfie gasps and loudly calls out Parfai's name. Parfait pouts in mock offense, complaining that it is honestly incredibly rude not to invite her to an exciting event like this. When a bewildered Kuro stammers to ask why she is here, Parfait confidently declares that it goes without saying she came because of love. With hearts floating around her deeply blushing face, she gazes affectionately at him and lovingly calls him her big brother. Kuro recoils in absolute terror and confusion, nervously sweating as he points to himself in pure disbelief. Clasping her hands together, Parfait deeply apologizes for her past rude words, explaining that just thinking about the intense tension of their previous battle makes her heart flutter. She swoons over the beautiful way her big brother held a sword to her throat, though Kuro sweat drops while internally noting that his memory of that terrifying moment is quite different. Parfait passionately declares that meeting someone strong in body and spirit is her true happiness, and she would gladly brave fire, water, or curse domains just to be with the two people she admires. Reaching out with a manic thrill, she cheerfully invites the strongest trio to slaughter their enemies together. Without warning, she suddenly tells the others to wait and confidently steps forward, casually declaring that she will leave this place to them. A dark smirk crosses her face as she notes how honestly rude her opponent is while a massive stone fist crashes right beside her. Unfazed by the absolute destruction, she promises to come chasing after them once she has successfully carved her mark on both the enemy and her beloved comrades. Taunting the giant beast, Parfait gleefully asks if it is ready because it is finally time for a dance. With explosive agility, she launches herself into the air as the stone giant's massive sweep completely misses her form. Colossal chunks of debris are blown apart into a chaotic storm of shrapnel as her overwhelming magical force collides with the giant's defenses. Mocking the creature's regeneration, Parfait confidently boasts that her blade is far faster and easily targets the heart that supplies its magic. Locking her eyes onto the glowing core hidden within the crumbling rubble, she flashes a wicked grin and excitedly screams that she has found it. Gathering all of her surging magical energy, she prepares to deliver the absolute final blow to the monstrous entity. With a single, devastating swing, she brutally cuts through the air, unleashing a blinding shockwave of pure destruction. Rushing ahead, Kuro asks if it is okay to leave Parfait behind, but Elfie confidently assures him that the girl is more than strong enough on her own. Kuro reflects on how they have relied on many people to buy time for the magical construct, realizing their only remaining goal is to defeat Raikou and rescue Shiro. Kuro suddenly gasps and freezes in his tracks, his eyes widening in sheer terror as he senses a deeply familiar and sinister anomaly. A colossal, foreboding tower ominously materializes amidst the desolate ruins of the shattered city. A catastrophic shockwave of dark energy violently erupts from the structure, instantly vaporizing the surrounding landscape. Trembling with dread, Kuro stammers as he realizes this terrifying phenomenon is exactly the same as that dark time in his past. A sinister voice echoes across the wasteland, acknowledging that Kuro has come a long way but chillingly declaring that this is where they finally part ways. The villain flashes a sadistic grin, eagerly proposing that they settle their fight once and for all. The voice reaches a manic crescendo, promising to deliver this final conclusion to Kuro purely in the form of his absolute death. A chilling silence falls over the battlefield as the narration solemnly notes that the heroes simply looked up. Standing amidst the apocalyptic rubble, Parfait and the others all silently gaze up at the exact same foreboding sky. Arriving at the devastating scene, Kuro and his companions stare in shock as she trails off. A dark, ominous magic heavily blankets the ruined cityscape. Recognizing the terrifying scale of the threat, she identifies the spell as the Oath of Dawn, a strategic class magic. Remembering the spell's horrific past, an observer fearfully wonders if that idiot is seriously planning to kill Tawa and the others. The narration grimly recalls how this exact magic once turned an entire enemy city into a desolate, scorched wasteland in a single instant. Stepping forward with grim determination, Kuro prepares himself as a comrade wishes him good luck. Kuro realizes Raiku's true aim was to wear them down in battle just to buy time for this ultimate spell to complete. He worries if his unique magic could safely absorb the devastating attack should he lose himself again. Kuro glances back sharply as the white-haired woman steps forward, her long hair billowing in the intense wind. Calling out in surprise, Kuro watches as she leaps dramatically into the air. Floating gracefully high above the battlefield, she positions herself directly in the path of the devastating magic. An arrogant Raiku taunts her efforts, boasting that her denial magic cannot possibly erase his completed spell. Narrowing her eyes with intense focus, the woman extends her hands toward the falling destruction. A massive sphere of pure white energy violently erupts from her position, illuminating the dark sky. Shielding his eyes from the blinding flash, a stunned Kuro watches the impossible feat unfold. Raiku's confident sneer shatters into absolute panic as he realizes his ultimate magic was neutralized in a single strike. Staring blankly up at the clear sky, the defeated mage mutters in sheer disbelief. Observing the glowing woman, the narration notes that the white hero's magical power and output are completely abnormal. Exhausted but sincere, she turns back and softly asks if she managed to help. Flashing a confident smile, Kuro reassures her that she saved them all and firmly takes over the fight. Refusing to accept defeat, a furious Raiku screams for them to shut up despite pleas for him to surrender. Roaring with unhinged rage, Raiku summons a massive surge of crackling lightning and declares the battle is not over. The white hero gasps in pure horror, shocked that the rogue mage still possesses so much magical power. Raiku maniacally boasts that his highly efficient magic will easily outlast her ability to neutralize it. Pointing a deadly finger forward, he sadistically promises to kill Kuro the moment her mana finally runs dry. Unfazed by the threat, Kuro stands resolute with his sword drawn and his dark cape flaring violently behind him. Raiku's manic grin suddenly falters as he stares at Kuro, confused by a sudden shift in his opponent's power. A memory reveals Rukius offering his own magic to Kuro, explaining he already convinced the others to do the same. A bespectacled ally urges Kuro to use their strength, noting his unique black attribute can easily assimilate their rejected magic. Setting aside traditional rules, the united heroes willingly offer their glowing magical spheres to empower Kuro. Entrusting him with their power, they implore Kuro to use it to save the innocent. Back in the present, a desperate Raiku unleashes a barrage of magic, screaming that petty tricks will not work twice. Multiple devastating beams of destructive light streak aggressively across the ruined battlefield toward Kuro. Raiku sneers at Kuro's pathetic schemes, fully expecting his overwhelming firepower to block everything. Shattering Raiku's expectations, a magnificent black-winged horse bursts forth alongside Tawa's blazing attacks. The twin divine beasts tear violently through the battlefield, obliterating the terrain with their devastating charge. Leaping gracefully through the chaotic explosions, Tawa fiercely dodges the remaining magical blasts to close the distance. Staring at the overwhelming counterattack, a terrified Raiku stammers in panic, wondering if this is the work of Lord Blue. Lunging forward with unstoppable momentum, Kuro focuses every ounce of his being on saving Shiro. Channeling the combined hopes of his allies, Kuro unleashes a devastating, severing flash to completely obliterate his enemy. Kuro lunges through the air with desperate speed as the massive stone tower behind him begins to break apart into floating fragments. Inside the crumbling structure, the captive girl Shiro watches in utter shock as Kuro suddenly materializes to intervene. Raikou recoils in disbelief, his eyes widening as he realizes Kuro has successfully harnessed the magical power of the other heroes. Shiro is sent tumbling backward as the remaining chains binding her finally snap under the force of the magical explosion. Suspended in midair amidst the falling debris, Shiro reaches out a hand while her long hair flows wildly in the magical gale. As Shiro begins to fall, a look of pure relief replaces her terror. Kuro catches her in a heroic embrace, cradling her protectively as they descend through the dark sky. Gazing up at her savior with tearful eyes, Shiro whispers Kuro's name in realization. Below them, Raikou lies battered among the ruins, looking up at the pair with a mixture of pure rage and exhaustion. Kuro lands firmly on the ground, his expression hardening into one of lethal intent as he glares at his fallen adversary. Darkness begins to swirl around Kuro's form, manifesting as the powerful cloak of black. Readying himself for the final encounter, Kuro declares that everything has finally come down to settling this fight once and for all. The towering heart of the evil domain completely disintegrates, marking the end of the enemy's stronghold. Shiro looks on in awe, realizing the captive maiden has finally been saved by the black hero. Kuro stands resolute before the ruins, his tattered cloak billowing in the wind as the atmosphere grows heavy with tension. The narrative builds to a fever pitch, signaling that the brutal struggle against the evil hero is reaching its ultimate conclusion. Raikou slowly pushes himself up from the rubble, sneering at Kuro and calling him foolish for his choices. He taunts Kuro, claiming he only brought allies and borrowed magic because he knew he couldn't bridge the gap in power alone. Refusing to hold back any longer, Raikou roars that he will torment and kill both Kuro and Shiro together. Elfie steps forward to support Shiro, acknowledging to Kuro that the victory now rests entirely on his shoulders. Kuro stands tall in the center of the ruins, glowing with a dark aura as he prepares to face Raikou for the final time. Turning slightly toward Shiro, Kuro gently tells her that from this point forward, she no longer needs to watch this violence. Behind the hero, a massive, obsidian pyramid of energy suddenly begins to manifest in the middle of the wasteland. Kuro unleashes his ultimate containment spell, the Black Prison, to isolate the battlefield from the outside world. Raikou looks around in a panic, sweat beading on his forehead as he demands to know what is happening. Stepping into the shadows, Kuro coldly informs his rival that this prison is the only fitting place for a sinner like him. Desperate to break free, Raikou screams Kuro's name and prepares a frantic counterassault. A massive explosion of magical energy ripples through the interior of the Black Prison as the two powers collide. Kuro reaches out a hand, noting that within this specialized space, Raikou's magic will be swallowed up and rendered useless. Raikou snarls in defiance, summoning a massive array of dawn-light projectiles to overwhelm the hero. He screams for the filthy outsider to disappear as he unleashes the devastating 10,000 heavens. Kuro counters by channeling the White Forge into his Black Devourer, combining opposing attributes into a single strike. Raikou is shaken to see Kuro utilizing the White attribute again, his confidence visibly crumbling. A rain of brilliant magical energy descends upon the arena, lighting up the darkness of the prison. Frustrated and failing, Raikou calls Kuro a coward and demands he fight using only his own strength. Suddenly, Raikou's weapon is encased in black ice, stopping his attack mid-swing as his eyes bulge in surprise. Kuro follows up instantly by summoning a torrent of black flame that engulfs the area. Raikou is sent flying by the explosion, his sword spinning away as he screams in agony. Clinging to his fading arrogance, Raikou grumbles that his power is meant to swallow everything and make him stronger. Kuro stands over him, calmly stating that this is his own version of fair and square, before asking if Raikou wants to keep going. Kuro stands silently as Raikou, beaten and sweating, gasps and reluctantly admits defeat. Desperation washes over Raikou's face as he frantically acknowledges his wrongs and apologizes for all his offenses. Pleading for forgiveness, the fallen hero begs Kuro, promising he will do absolutely anything if he is just spared. Kuro ruthlessly demands that Raikou undo all the harm caused on a whim, specifically ordering him to restore Ikona's burned hometown of Jiborn and bring back Shiro's mother. Panicking as Kuro points his dark blade directly at him, Raikou stammers to wait, arguing that Kuro can't possibly make those demands. Desperately offering wealth instead, Raikou promises to give up everything he owns, including gold, mansions, and magic tools. A cold voice reads the royal verdict declaring that the Dawn is stripped of all titles and privileges following a vote by the military brass and heroes. Surrounded by levitating blades, a stunned Raikou is told he is no longer a hero and is now merely a target for subjugation. The crushing reality sets in as Raikou groans, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter disbelief. Trembling uncontrollably on his knees, the broken man begs for his life, his pride completely shattered. Kuro stands tall with his dark cape billowing, pointing his sword at the kneeling, pathetic figure pleading for mercy. Sweating bullets, Raikou demands to know what Kuro will do, acknowledging that his own actions were unforgivable. Kuro stares down coldly before sharply striking Raikou with the hilt of his sword, telling him to spend the rest of his life in prison without seeking revenge. Shocked by the unexpected mercy, Raikou gasps in relief that Kuro is actually letting him live. In a sudden, treacherous blur of motion, Raikou swings a massive blade toward Kuro's exposed back. Roaring Kuro's name with maniacal glee, Raikou mocks his soft heart and strikes, completely unaware of the dark shadow flaring defensively. Kuro's voice cuts through the tension, calmly stating that they don't need him and reflecting on his own second life. Raikou chokes up blood as his surprise attack completely fails, leaving him stunned that his moves were perfectly read. Collapsing in total defeat, Raikou questions how someone as special as him could possibly lose and wonders what he did wrong. A terrifying, demonic aura envelopes Kuro as he glares with chilling intensity, completely dominating the battlefield. The space around them shatters like fragile glass, signaling the absolute collapse of Raikou's magical domain. Kuro stands victorious amidst the falling debris, his sword lowered as the dust begins to settle on the ruined landscape. The narration confirms that the hero who strayed from the path was definitively defeated by the new heroes. A grand brick building stands under the cleared sky as the story shifts to the rescued maiden and the black hero. Kuro and Shiro are seen back in their daily lives, stepping into a bustling tavern filled with cheerful patrons. The lively tavern is packed with busy barmaids, and a flustered Ikona eagerly answers the call to serve the next customer. A tearful Taiga hides his face in relief over Shiro's safety, while she gently tells him to stop crying and credits Kuro for saving the day. Taiga sincerely thanks Kuro for restoring the burned-down tavern, before suddenly turning his attention to the white hero. Staring at the massive, fully restored building, the narration notes that the white attribute's power of rejection erased Raikou's damage as if it never happened. Shiro modestly brushes off the praise, but Kuro turns to Quinn with a soft smile, sincerely thanking her for her invaluable help. A beautifully dressed woman shyly approaches, asking if this is the life's due in, while Quinn blushes, asking Kuro if she was truly useful. An impressive gathering of familiar, formidable heroines stands proudly at the entrance, ready to join the celebration. The tavern erupts in excited cheers as patrons realize that so many of Deratora's legendary heroes have arrived for an amazing night. Kuro reassures a blushing girl that the mismanagement wasn't her fault, as the heroes explain they came to celebrate the victory and apologize. A cheerful hero wraps her arm around Kuro, offering him a bottle and demanding he stop being so gloomy at a celebration. A girl angrily scolds the drunk hero, Tawa, calling her a killjoy and pointing out that she just wanted an excuse to drink alcohol. Shiro stands defensively with a fiery gaze, boldly declaring her presence to the newcomers before suggesting she should help out with the customers. Two jealous siblings intensely stare down Shiro's generous figure, wondering if this is the woman their dear brother risked his life to save. The girls agree to enjoy themselves, but are suddenly caught off guard by the bizarre and shocking appearance of a cow in the tavern. Glasses clink together in a joyous toast as the heroes, friends, and patrons celebrate their hard-fought victory with wide smiles and endless drinks. The companions joyfully celebrate their hard-fought victory as glasses clink and laughter fills the lively tavern room. An empty bottle rolls casually across the wooden floorboards, signaling the end of the raucous night of drinking. A battered warrior sleeps soundly on the table as a friend notes that Kuro has found some truly good companions, declaring it a great drinking party. Surveying the peaceful tavern, the allies reflect on everyone's happiness but acknowledge the difficult path Kuro now faces. A serious ally states that taking on the power of Dawn from Raikou places a massive responsibility on the newly minted hero. Realizing the heavy burden Kuro now carries, his companions firmly agree that they must cooperate and support him from here on out. Outside beneath the starry night sky, the tavern sits quietly as one of the friends suddenly wonders where Kuro went. Shiro ventures out into the moonlit ruins and finds Kuro standing alone, asking if he is still working on a day like this. Stepping closer to the crumbling amphitheater, Shiro tells him she just wanted to talk about what happens next. Kuro solemnly admits he knows she has been avoiding him ever since he killed Raikou, trying to assure her that it is okay. Looking away with a pained expression, Shiro softly denies his assumption and tells him that is not the reason. She confesses her deep fear and guilt, revealing her worry that Kuro was forced to become a killer entirely because of her. Kuro insists that not everyone can be saved with goodwill and reminds her that the lethal conflict was strictly between him and Raikou, absolving her of fault. He firmly declares that some villains simply will not stop until they are dead, wishing he could share her pure mindset but accepting his darker reality. With a heartbreaking look of sadness, Shiro firmly tells him that no matter the circumstances, killing people is fundamentally wrong. Accepting her rejection, Kuro apologizes for bothering her and turns his back to leave, prompting Shiro to call out his name in panic. Stopping him in his tracks, Shiro desperately tells Kuro that he is far too kind for his own good. She fiercely reminds him of how he risked his life for strangers, saving Ikona and answering Taiga's call for help despite getting hurt. Shiro points out that he never abandons people in trouble, even while bearing the immense burden of searching for his little sister in this strange world. Kuro snaps back that he was suicidal on the day he reincarnated, shouting that she has it all wrong as Shiro tearfully admits she cannot bear seeing his kind soul tainted. His voice softens as he confesses that his actions are all because she gave him a second life, encouraging him to help others and search for his sister. Locking his intense gaze with hers, Kuro fiercely declares that he did not save her out of general kindness, but specifically because she is Shiro. The profound weight of his words hangs in the air as he reiterates that his absolute devotion is solely for her. A deep blush spreads across Shiro's cheeks as she processes his confession, breathlessly asking if his words mean what she thinks they do. Kuro confirms her hopes with a simple, resolute yes, erasing all the lingering doubts between them. The sparkling waters of the ruined sanctuary shimmer beautifully in the moonlight, reflecting the quiet intimacy of the moment. They embrace in a passionate kiss as the boy fondly remembers the precious words a girl once spoke to him long ago.